Today we're going to start a mini-series about the extraordinary daughters of the last ruler of the Sikh Empire, the Maharaja of the Punjab. Now, you have Sophia, Catherine, Bamba, Irene and Pauline. Now, these stories are so diverse. They include the suffragettes, the women who fought to get women the vote, mixed-race life in Edwardian London, lesbian love in Nazi Germany, and resistance against the British Empire. And let me tell you, Empire Club members get this whole series in one go with no ads, so just follow the link in the description to join our club.
Now, these princesses grew up in the heart of the British Empire, which had destroyed their world and their family. And in this, I'm going to hand the reins over to Anita, because this is really not just her story. It's a story which she discovered, which she made famous. A woman who had been totally forgotten by history was resurrected. And you wrote a wonderful book about it, which I much loved and enjoyed and reviewed.
You did, and you were very, very kind of it. And, you know, it's probably, whatever I do in this life, the thing I'm going to be most proud of. I wrote the biography of Princess Sophia Duleep Singh and published it in 2015. And, you know, you've got to just imagine at that time, no one had ever heard of the Indian suffragette. It was just a strange, weird, some people said, have you made up a novel? Because it seems so far-fetched. But now, 2026, this is a woman who had a postage stamp dedicated to her. She's had a blue plaque in her honour.
Which you opened and managed to drop the entire thing on your head, I remember.
Curtain came on my head. Yes, it did. I yanked it with gusto. Also, currently, an exhibition in Kensington Palace Gardens is dedicated to her and her sisters. So we're going to begin this series with Sophia, the Indian princess who fought for British women to have the vote. And I should say, we sort of lightly covered this at the beginning of our empire adventure.
When we were just little baby podlings.
You liked the podlings, didn't you? I knew you would, yes. So, look, we're going to go into much more detail, but also, rather than just sort of telling you about the family a lot, I urge you to go back and listen to our Kohinoor episodes where we go into a real deep dive into her father and grandfather. But we might as well sum it up. So, I mean, just why don't you take the reins here, Willie, and sum up what her backstory, her lineage is.
So, Sophia Duleep Singh was born 150 years ago, and she was a product of the great Sikh Empire, which was a considerable empire. Not many people, I think, learn about this at school. But the Sikhs at one point controlled not only the current Indian Punjab and its Pakistani equivalent over the border, but a huge chunk of Kashmir and Himalayas right up to the borders of China and the Wakhan corridor. And it's an enormous chunk of territory and was very powerful. It was the one Indian kingdom which, at the time of Ranjit Singh, had resisted the British. It had ex-Napoleonic generals running its army. And it was both economically and militarily a considerable force, and the British did not tangle with it.
You're right. And right at the helm of that was Sophia's grandfather, Maharaja Ranjit Singh.
Sher-e Punjab.
Sher-e Punjab, the Lion of Punjab, was what he was known as. So there are two very different memories of Ranjit Singh's reign. In Pakistan, he is, Willie, not remembered very kindly. In India, a hero who repelled Afghan warlords who came over the mountains and would regularly raid Punjab. But Pakistan, not so enamoured.
It is one of those stories which divides, depending on which side of the border you are. Pakistanis remember the very brutal generals, many of them these ex-Napoleonic guys who were regularly hanging people all over the gates of Peshawar and so on. But in India, he's regarded as one of the most tolerant, most enlightened rulers. And of course, for Sikhs, he's their great hero. Every Sikh looks to Ranjit Singh as the greatest warrior who led their people and did this extraordinary job of freeing them from the bondage of both Marathas and Afghans and Mughals and giving them their own enormous state.
Yeah, absolutely right. And look, just in case you don't know, he cuts quite the figure. He had one empty, sightless eye socket. And there is this story that's attached to his mythology that when a courtier once asked him, what happened to your eye, sire? He said, God wanted me to look upon all religions with one eye, which is why he took the light from the other from me. And Willie, something very famous that people will be familiar with on his bicep. Tell us.
So something that's still knocking around in contemporary politics, and anyone that saw our recent series about Mamdani's intervention about the Kohinoor, this links back to Ranjit Singh, because Ranjit Singh prized the diamond out of the Afghans, particularly Shah Shuja-ul-Mulk, who he was his prisoner, allegedly, according to Afghan sources, torturing his son in front of him until he handed it over. And this is, the symbol, this was the jewel in the crown in the hands of the Sikhs. So this is a great moment for Sikh history.
Absolutely right. So look, the story goes that after the death of Ranjit Singh, and again, go to our Kohinoor episodes if you want to hear this in more detail. We go into it in granular detail in that. But there is great upheaval in the kingdom, and the family is at war because who is going to succeed Ranjit Singh? Until the last man standing is not a man at all. It's a little boy called Duleep Singh.
With chubby cheeks in the picture.
Indeed. And he is going to be the father of our heroine today, Sophia. His story, we go into an enormous amount of detail in our Kohinoor episodes again. And Willie, I mean, you've sort of said it's a heartbreak story, isn't it, really?
It's a deeply upsetting story, both politically, because it is the tale of the end of Sikh rule and the conquest by this corporation, by the East India Company. But also on a personal level, this is a guy who loses his kingdom, grows up to be this beautiful adolescent that sort of Queen Victoria falls in love with, who's famously painted by Winterhalter. It's one of the greatest, if not the greatest portrait to come from the Raj.
So, yeah, really tragic, completely disenfranchised. He ends up in England and becomes a favourite of Queen Victoria, one of her many pets, some have observed, because she liked a foreign prince and princess. But she loves him. And so he's in great favour. But he can't marry anybody when he comes of age because he's too brown. Instead, he goes searching for a bride. And the place that he searches for a bride is a mission in Cairo because he wants someone virginal, pure. He's disillusioned with the kind of sophistication of the British court.
We should have to say that at this point, he is far from virginal.
Oh, no. It's been living it large in the clubs of England. But he finds this young beauty, and she's 16 years old. Her name is Bamba Duleep. And it's really important because she gets written out of the story. And that's what we're trying to put back, these really important characters into this story. She is the daughter of a German merchant and what was described at the time as an Abyssinian slave. Somebody that was a mistress rather than a wife. Somebody who serviced her mullah rather than was his partner in life. And they then, Duleep, the product of this union, this very beautiful, Arabic-speaking, completely clean living flower of a child, is married to a much older man in 1864. And she is the mother of Sophia. So Sophia and her siblings, there are 6 of them. There were 7, but one died very soon after birth. But 6 of them in the nursery. And this poor woman, Bamba Duleep, who is completely alienated from society. She's alone. She doesn't have anything in common with the Duchess of Atholl or all the people who are flocking around Duleep Singh and his marvellous house called Elvedon on the Norfolk-Suffolk borders.
Which used to belong to my mother's family, the Keppels, before he bought it.
Absolutely got to get a Dalrymple in there somewhere.
Not
Keppel.
a Keppel.
It's a Keppel. It is a Keppel in there. But he sort of recreates this grand Mughal, Indian, Sikh empire throwback with a mishmash of styles that he gleans from archives in the London Museum. And John Nash designs it for him. And so, there is all of this going on. And it looks like this young girl is going to grow up in the lap of luxury. We should talk about the children, though. I mean, because there were a few of them.
So there are these wonderful photographs of these kids. There's Victor, the eldest, who will go to Sandhurst and inherit the title. Frederick, known to the family as Freddie, who will go to Cambridge and become an antiquarian, improbably. And then there's Albert Edward, who she calls Eddie. And then there's 3 extraordinary women, Bamba, Catherine, and Sophia.
Yeah, and honestly, the women are much more interesting than the men in this story.
As so often the case, Anita.
I'm glad you concede that point. 6 children, all in the nursery, together, splitting their time between Belgravia and Elvedon. It should be said that after the huge falling out that takes place over the Kohinoor Diamond, again, I refer you to the Kohinoor episodes, it is a terrible alcoholism that descends on poor Bamba Duleep, is somebody who is not very good at handling the situation that she is in. And increasingly, because she's lonely and because she's isolated and because her husband is basically sleeping around behind her back, she is starting to reach for the bottle. Anyway, Sophia, born on the 8th of August, 1876. It's her 150th anniversary this year.
During a heat wave.
During a heat wave, which we're recording this, experiencing that heat wave right now, becomes a beloved of Queen Victoria. Out of all of the daughters, it is Sophia who is the goddaughter of Queen Victoria. She even takes her name, her middle name, as a sort of a doffing of the cap by the Maharaja, who's still friendly when she's born to Queen Victoria. Her middle name is Alexandrovna, named for Queen Victoria, whose name is Alexandrina. So even then, Duleep has to put his own little twist on it, but he has this thing of, you are connected to the Queen of England, the Empress of India. Don't you ever forget it. And Victoria, despite, the fact that she wears this family heirloom and is referred to behind her back by some of the Duleep Singhs as Mrs. Fagin, the receiver of stolen goods, does actually warm to the children and it to Sophia in particular. So it all feels, William, that it's all going to be great. They're going to live this charmed existence. But it goes wrong. It goes very badly wrong.
And Duleep, who is in his youth this beautiful boy that Queen Victoria falls in love with, who is painted by Winterhalter, one of the greatest portraits of the Raj, he turns into a bit of a monster, actually, by then. He's not someone who we would have liked on this podcast.
No, and he's not kind, really. Not kind. I mean, he acts the adoring father, has a camera, because cameras have just been invented at this time. So he takes these loving portraits, particularly of Sophia. She's the most sort of photographed as a young baby of all of her brothers and sisters. And he likes doing these portraits of her sitting in her mother's lap, and her mother just looks so sad. But the little baby is sort of like beaming out and lovely. But there's not much else. And that's because his mind's on other things. Because for him, catastrophically, the British keep him on rather a short leash financially, which he doesn't like. He spends like his best friend, the Prince of Wales, because he's been taught to believe by Queen Victoria that he's one of the family. He sort of spends a lot of time at Osborne House in the Isle of Wight, is right in the inner sanctum of her affections. But every time he needs some money, he has to write to the India Office. He has to ask them. He has to say, look, can I actually spend money on this or that? And he does spend.
And he's aware, isn't he, that he's that they've taken this incredibly rich kingdom. The richest land in India was his. And now he's having to write for every fiver he wants to put on the horses at Newmarket.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he's leading a dissolute lifestyle. Let's not make any bones about this. But what he becomes bitter about is when they start to cut him off. Because they start thinking, the India Office, Queen Victoria's been too indulgent of this guy. Why should we be paying his gambling debts? Or if he wants the latest styles for his children, why should we be doing that? So they start returning his invoices, saying we're not going to pay them. And so he has to start selling his jewels, whatever little he has left from this vast fortune that had been amassed by the Sikh Empire. And he writes to the Queen, accusing her government of having to, of having set out to destroy him from the very beginning. I'll just read a little bit from one of the letters, Willie, that he wrote in rage. From childhood, I have been absolutely in the hands of the government without a will or independent action of my own, trusting implicitly to their good faith. And now there appears to have been a deliberate intention from the first to leave my children and family to gradually sink in this world.
And in 1886, he finally snaps, doesn't he? He packs up with his wife and children and he tries to go back to India to raise the flag. He tries to reconvert to Sikhism, and he has a plan which the British get onto, that he's going to foment a revolution in India. And so there's one very simple solution for that the British have. They just don't let him get there.
Yeah, he gets as far as Aden. You're absolutely right. The British-controlled port on the Red Sea. All voyages go through the Suez Canal. That was the trajectory. He is stopped at Aden. He is arrested. His family is arrested. Sophia's first arrest, and it will be the first of many, happens when she is 9 years old. So what happens in Aden is that he declares himself, Duleep Singh, Sophia's father, as the implacable foe of the British. that he is going to get back to India one way or the other. The Tsar is going to rise up with him. They are going to pincer the British out of the north of India.
And this is a complete reversal from the days in his 20s when he was this apple of Queen Victoria's eye.
The darling
Yeah.
of her eye. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. It is the most sour of relationships. So he's staying in Aden, refusing to go back home to England and be a good boy. But what he does at this point, Willie, is why I actually, for somebody I really did care for when he was a little boy, and I felt terribly sorry about his separation from his mother, how the British put her in a tower, how they forced him as a frightened little boy to sign this piece of paper that gave over his kingdom, his diamond, his future, and was sort of sent off to become a Britisher. I despise what he does at this point because he cuts his family loose. He tells his wife, who is already depressed enough to be married to such a neglectful man, that, you go back, take the kids back. I have nothing to do with this. I am onwards to India. So she has to go back to England penniless. He has sold everything for this adventure to go and reclaim his throne. He has thought nothing about the welfare of his children. He buggers off to Paris. He's got a secret meet-up with his mistress, a chambermaid from Kennington called Ada Wetherall. Remember her name. We're going to meet her again in episode 4. She's going to be very important.
Who he meets in basically a bordello.
It's a knock-and shop. Yes, Cox's Hotel, appropriately named. Ada works there, and Duleep is a frequent flyer, shall we say. And that's how those two get together.
It's all very tragic. It's tragic story.
100%.
Yeah.
Bamba washes up back in England with 6 listless children. She is abandoned. She is humiliated. She is broken. People are spitting at her in the streets because they are, the newspapers which once adored Duleep are now talking about him being a traitor, that he's trying to side with the Tsar. What the hell? This ungrateful Eastern potentate. Who the hell does he think he is? And she dies in 1887. Sophia is 10 years old. It's actually Sophia who gets ill first. She catches typhoid. Her mother, who has just managed to pull herself out of a bottle long enough to be distraught and is nursing her and is praying on her knees every night for her to recover, catches the typhoid. And the very morning Sophia opens her eyes and her fever has broken, the first thing she sees is her mother dead on the floor by her bed. So just imagine that kind of trauma. She sort of never forgave herself for that she had the illness that then spread to her mother.
And then only 6 years later, Eddie dies, the much beloved Eddie. He develops pneumonia, doesn't he?
Yeah, Sophia's beloved little brother that she has actually acted as mother to ever since her own mother died is so promising. He has just won a place to Eton, and before he gets to take it up, he develops pneumonia and he dies. And, Sophia sits by his bedside just like her mother sat beside her with Bamba and Catherine while he's slipping in and out of consciousness and calling for his parents. It is awful. So there you have, Sophia sitting by little Eddie's bedside with her sister Bamba, also named after their mother, and Catherine, looking at this little boy fighting a fever that he just can't escape. And he's slipping in and out of consciousness and he's asking for his mother and father, and he dies, and he's buried in Elvedon in the churchyard next to his mother, and people still go on pilgrimages there.
Very tragic little graveyard under these very English conifer trees. I went in pouring rain, which didn't add to the kind of atmosphere of happiness about the whole place.
Well, if you do ever venture that way, you'll see that there are always little tributes left in front of these 3 graves.
Lots of flowers by
flowers
British
and
sheiks.
candles.
Yeah.
And little notes.
Yeah.
So the Duleep Singh family, and Sophia's just basically losing everybody she loves. A father who then very soon after Eddie dies, he dies broken and broke in a Parisian hotel, never made it back to Punjab, never got his reputation back, was destroyed by this second relationship with Ada Wetherall. More of that in the 4th episode of this miniseries. And the 3 remaining sisters are now effectively looking after each other. Victor, the eldest, he's at Sandhurst. he hasn't really got a paternal bone in his body. Freddie's at Cambridge. Nobody else is going to come and save them.
Who's paying the bills and where are they living?
Really good question, because Indians don't like to hear this, but it is Queen Victoria who intervenes. And it is Queen Victoria, because of her affection largely for Sophia, who decides to put her hand out and catch this desperate family. So she puts these children under the guardianship of a man called Arthur Oliphant. When Sophia, Catherine, Bamba, Victor, are getting older, just before they're all going off to their own adventures, she gives Sophia primarily, but the other sisters are in tow, a home. Faraday House on the grounds of Hampton Court Palace. It's a grace and favour residence, and she gives an allowance of £200 a year to keep it up. And this is where Sophia is going to live on and off for the rest of her life.
Is it in the palace or on the grounds? Or where
right
is it?
Opposite the front gates of Hampton Court. So it's part of the Crown Estate, or it was part of the Crown Estate at that time. And it was one of this real estate of grace and favour that the Queen would give to those she had the most affection for. So there would be heroes from the mutiny, as the British called it. Anyone who had fought and lost their lives, their wives and children could find a home here in these grace and favours, or dignitaries, or favourites of the court. And Sophia is one such. So this is going to actually be pretty much the centre point of her life for the rest of her life.
And how old is she by the time she moves into Faraday House? We saw her at age 9 coming back from Aden. What is she
18,
now?
She's 18 years old when her coming out occurs at Buckingham Palace. She has her debut in front of Queen Victoria herself. And there's a very beautiful little detail about how Queen Victoria allows her to kiss her on both cheeks, which is really a sign of favour. Otherwise, people curtsy from a distance, but Sophia is kissed and embraced, and she has tea with the Queen.
So she hasn't lost any of her status.
Sophia has it. But Victoria loathes her sisters, absolutely hates them.
Why?
Because they hate her.
Right.
That's the thing. And she has spies looking, after these children who are constantly feeding back anything disloyal that they might say. And Sophia is always regarded to be sort of the pliant one, the mannered one, whereas the other two are called wild and feral.
And she grows into quite a beauty.
She's not classically beautiful. I find her beautiful.
And
the newspapers
too.
at the time, well, good. And the newspapers at the time found her beautiful. And partly it was because she knew how to dress herself.
She's wearing some very fancy togs on the pictures I'm looking at here.
She's able to wear the very latest fashion. And in fact, the British embrace her. They call her, sort of a perfect Edwardian princess. A thoroughly English gal, notwithstanding her Oriental name, is how the Church Times put it. But, despite this quite vacuous life that she's leading, going to every party.
Breeding prize Pomeranians. I like that.
Yeah, she enters crafts and wins with her dogs. And she's also, very good on a horse. Her stock is rising. The sisters is sinking. And Victor and Freddie are sort of, nothing and nowhere. Victor's a lot like his father, and he's being closely watched.
I think you're underestimating this nice antiquarian who does some lovely antiquarian stuff.
He will be very important, Freddie, but not in any way that newspapers will notice or society will care. That's why he goes off to live in Norfolk quietly and collect books and coats of arms. That's Freddie. But Freddie is a great support, a solace to the rest of the family. Even though Sophia is the one that they can bear and the one that they like, she isn't from what British society would call a safe family, a safe background. She's got a father who tried to bring down the Raj. Her grandmother escaped a British fortress. Her elder brother, Victor, is as scandalous as his dad was and is declared bankrupt, and that's reported widely in the press. And, Freddie quietly living his antiquarian life in Norfolk, where he's so eccentric, Freddie. He banishes electricity from his house. He thinks it's awful.
I love the sound of him. He
collects
great.
Jacobean art. You'd like him even more because he's obsessed.
I love Jacobean art.
He loves all that. And he loves the monarchy. So one little detail which I found when I was doing research is that he hanged a portrait of Oliver Cromwell upside down in his toilet. So anybody who was taking a leak would have a look at Cromwell standing on his head. So, you've got a really sort of strange family. But we're going to take a break now because this thoroughly English girl who's been sort of moderately educated, but not too much.
In Brighton, of all places. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're all sort of packed off to different places to try and improve them. Something will happen in 1902 which will change everything. And this thoroughly English gal who everybody loves and invites to every party is going to end up enemy of the people, despised by the British press. So the year is 1902. The three sisters are desperate to get to the Delhi Darbar, the celebration of Edward VII's coronation. Victoria has died. Her son has taken over. There is going to be this great, grand spectacle for Edward's coronation. Edward's not going to be bothered to turn up. He won't turn up. But the great and the good, everybody from Sophia society is going. But the girls don't have an invitation. And so they sort of scheme and they beg and they try and they end up going behind the back of the Secretary of State for India and turning up. And actually what should have been a triumphant homecoming for them, sort of returning to the place where your father was a Maharaja, is awful. Will you just go through sort of the kind of treatment that, because I think it's true to say, and I have said this, that this is the first time Sophia will experience racism. In England, she's a little darling. She's Queen Victoria's favourite. Everybody, she only sort of skitters across the top of high society. In India, she's another brown face among millions.
And this, I think, is a frequent feature of the colonial period, that Indians such as Gandhi come to England, they become successful lawyers, they have a circle of vegetarian, spiritualist, mystic-loving friends around them. And the minute they go back to India, suddenly they're downgraded. They become colonial subjects. They're not treated with any respect at all. They're treated as the colonized. And this is what Sophia finds, having been very much, the queen of crufts with her Pomeranians and all the rest of it, and riding around on an early bicycle and this sort of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ladies' magazines love her. They can't get enough of her,
But the colonial authorities, rather than regarding her as a top dog breeder or whatever, regard her as a massive threat because she is the daughter of the deposed king of the Punjab. He could stir things up.
Yeah, and Willie, they told them no. They told them not to come. But they sort of snuck on different boats to get over to India, and they're there anyway. So when they do reach India, they are frozen out. The British officials at the Darbar treat them with contempt. They're not invited to any of the main ceremonies. They are pretty much shunned. And this is something that Sophia's never seen. The other thing she's never seen is how much her father and grandfather had. There are no roads in Lahore named for her father and grandfather. But there are lots named for Victoria. There are statues of Victoria everywhere. They're sort of a reflection of London.
Still there, sitting in the middle of the Mall in Lahore, yeah.
Yeah, the Mall, exactly. Sort of there are all these reflections of British places in her country, but her people are not acknowledged and her family is not acknowledged.
And even the Afghans have a nice memorial in the middle of Lahore in the form of the Zamzam gun, which is the great gun of the Punjab, which was an Afghan gun. But there's nothing from the Sikh period which is visible or which is celebrated. There are beautiful Sikh pavilions, of course, in Lahore Fort.
Well, and also there's the tomb of Ranjit Singh still is in Lahore, and I've been there. But other than that, it's kind of like her whole entity has been deleted. But where it hasn't been deleted? It hasn't been deleted in the minds of the people. So everywhere she goes, when she travels to Punjab from the Delhi Darbar, she is greeted by Sikhs primarily, but not singularly, who throw themselves at her feet and say, "You are the lion's cub. Tell us what you want us to do. Do you want us to fight? We will fight for you." And this respect that she gets from people who look like her completely turns her mind. And while she's in this sort of state of mental and emotional turmoil, she gets introduced to Indian nationalists.
Lala Lajpat Rai, who's not a famous name in Britain, but is well known in India, leading early nationalist. 1907, on that visit, she meets him. And she's very much in this group of people who will be in the centre of what will be the Indian National Congress and so on.
And what they start telling her about what Indians are experiencing, her eyes, the scales fall from her eyes. What was I thinking? Hang on, they don't accept me. okay, they're nice to me, but look at what they're doing in this country. And you're right, she starts to mix in nationalist circles. She starts to become political. And Lala Lajpat Rai is like a father to her, like the father she really didn't have in her own father. You know, he sort of cares for her. He shows her love and respect. And she writes furiously to her friends because Lala Lajpat Rai eventually will be caught in a lathi charge, a charge with long sticks. Lathis are these long sticks that the police
Made of
and the
bamboo,
military used. Yeah. And they could beat you savagely with them. And, you know, this is an older man who is peacefully protesting, and he gets whacked over the head and he dies.
So there's a moment of sort of complete revelation that this people that she thought respected her have rejected her, and the people she's forgotten about, her own people, the Sikhs and the people of northern India, cluster around her and give her the respect that she's not been getting from anyone else.
But they also expect something from her. You know, what they're saying is, tell us what to do. And she's like, I've never had to tell anybody what to do in my life. And when Lala Lajpat Rai is killed, she snaps, and she actually puts in writing in her diary how much she hates the British. She has never thought this in her life. She has fought her sisters who have hated the British for quite some time. That is no way to live. They're not our enemy. What are you talking about? Our father abandoned us. They're the ones who took care of us. But after Lala Lajpat Rai dies, well, that's it. So when she returns back to England,
she's a changed woman. She's completely different.
well, she starts doing things for other people rather than being sort of this selfish magazine pin-up. She starts fundraising for the Lashkars, you know, these Indian sailors who are dumped in England without being paid. You know, she starts looking after the abandoned ayahs who come over with small English children, and then, you know, when the children outgrow their need, they don't have the money to get back. And the most important thing is that she hears this voice that echoes what she's heard in India. And in India, it went, Avaz do, Avaz do, Avaz do. In England, the cry is, give us a voice, give us a voice, give us a voice. And it is coming from the suffragettes. So we shouldn't be too surprised, Willie, that she throws herself into the cause. She recognises it.
For those who don't know who the suffragettes are, explain to us, Anita, who they are, because major force at the beginning of the 20th century.
So women didn't have the vote. And it's, you know, we're talking about the 1900s. They don't have the vote, okay? And they are fighting to be recognised, first politely, with suffragist organisations who try and lobby politicians, argue their case, and then the suffragettes, who are much more militant. They march, they smash windows, they set fire to post office boxes.
Let off bombs every so often, yeah.
I mean, they don't kill people, but they do destroy property, rip up the orchids in Kew Gardens. You know, that the kind of thing that people thought, ugh, that's not what women do. It's a scandal. And these women are scandalous. They are detested by the press. It's a male-owned press, and so they are demons, harridans in the eye of the British press establishment. And Sophia, knowing this, knowing that she had, you know, sort of done the backstroke and the adulation of the British establishment, throws herself with these wicked, wicked women. She not only donates money, she drives press carriages through the streets of London. And this was one of the things that the suffragettes did to attract press attention, but also to wind people up. They would sort of drive their press carts covered in all their Votes for Women badges and park them outside theatres so that when the drunkards came out from a music hall performance, there would be a Barney and there would be a fight, and they could be seen to be fighting physically against the establishment.
Now, all this culminates in Black Friday, the 18th of November, 1910. And the man behind it is?
Well, Winston Churchill. You may have heard the name. So Winston Churchill is the Home Secretary. Winston Churchill has had some experience of Sophia Duleep Singh, and I think it's fair to say he don't like her. He don't like her at all, because not only has she been sort of rattling tins and going on these runs and making a spectacle of herself, she's been selling the suffragette newspaper outside Hampton Court Palace, which the Daily Mail has loved to get angry about. So, it's wound up the establishment so much that King George V, who's now on the throne, Edward doesn't reign for very long, tries to get her thrown out of Hampton Court. He goes to his private secretary and he said, is there any way of removing this tiresome princess from this place? It's embarrassing. And the answer that goes back is, if you want to put Queen Victoria's goddaughter out on the street, you do it. Because let us tell you, here at the India office, we think it might send out a rather dangerous message to India, where things are already restive, and we're talking about 1910 here, there's trouble brewing. And how is it going to look that this little Indian chit of a girl is standing up to the British establishment? This takes us neatly to Caxton Hall, November 1910. The 18th of November, I think one of the most depressing days in British democratic history. So the government's been dragging its feet on this piece of legislation called the Conciliation Bill. And the Conciliation Bill would give the vote to some women. But on the 18th, the Prime Minister, Asquith, effectively kills it dead. He says it's not going to have enough time to pass. He guillotines it. He suffocates it. Emmeline is ready. She's thought, Emmeline Pankhurst, who is this sort of pale-faced, absolute virago of a woman who leads the suffragettes.
Queen of the suffragettes. Yeah.
She knew this might happen. So she's gathered about 300 of her most committed suffragettes. And they plan to march to Parliament and hammer down the door and make Asquith explain himself. Not as a huge mob, because Winston Churchill, the Home Secretary, has cleverly passed a piece of legislation that makes it illegal to walk in groups of more than 12. So what they do, the suffragettes, because they are smart, is that they separate into many different groups of 12 and leave at 5-minute intervals to get to the House of Commons. And Sophia Duleep Singh is in the vanguard of this, marching shoulder to shoulder with Emmeline Pankhurst and the rock star suffragettes of their day. They reach the gate, St. Stephen's Gate. If you've been to Parliament Square, you'll know it very well. And they are effectively kettled by the police. They're sort of pushed back and not allowed to move. It doesn't seem violent. The place is filled with bystanders. There are sailors on shore leave who've turned up because it's been well trailed in the press that Asquith is not going to let this bill pass and that the suffragettes aren't going to let that stand. And so everybody is expecting violence. The suffragettes put on a good show, right? So it's filled with men. It's filled with police officers on horseback, in uniform, some not in uniform, and just members of the public. Lots of men gathered in Parliament Square. And the police have been given a really unusual order that day. They've been told, don't arrest the women, discourage them. Sort of a euphemistic line. But what it means is basically push them, hurt them, until they give up and go away. Because what Winston Churchill doesn't want is he doesn't want these bloody women clogging up the legal system, standing in courtrooms, denouncing the unfairness of not giving women the vote and making their speeches and going to prison and going on hunger strike and embarrassing him and the Crown even more. So what follows on Black Friday, when Sophia is kettled at the gate with Emmeline, the next group arrives, and then the group after that, and then the next group. And Sophia is forced to watch as these women are, there's no easier way of putting it, sexually assaulted by the police. Some are picked up and thrown against pavements and railings. You've got members of Parliament hanging out of the windows just to get a better look at what was going on, because it's a complete circus. Police officers picking up women and throwing them into crowds of men, saying, here, do whatever you want to these bloody bitches. You know, there are, I've seen testimony from that day. It is gruesome what is done. Women's breasts are punched. They are kicked between the legs. They are thrown back, but not arrested. And you've got Emmeline and Sophia and the others at the gate saying, arrest them, just arrest them. And no arrests are being made.
And what happens to Sophia herself? Is she assaulted?
What she does is she's a tiny, tiny slip of a woman. This violence goes on for 6 hours, but quite sort of early on, she manages to slip the cordon. She's tiny, right? She's about 5 foot tall.
How roughly like another lad of the Punjab on this podcast. Really?
I have 2 inches on her, let me tell you. 5'2". So she sort of slips out because she sees this one police officer who is repeatedly picking up a woman and smashing her against the concrete. And this woman gets up again because the women will not go back. That's the other thing. You know, they've been treated so harshly, but their absolute commitment is, we are going to get this vote this day. We are not going to retreat. No retreat. And so this poor woman who's dazed after being smashed against the concrete gets up again. She's picked up again, off her feet, dashed to the ground again. Sophia sees this and thinks, actually, third time she is going to die. So she rushes in. She gets in between the police officer and this unnamed suffragette, we never learn her name, and she body checks the man away. Now, he would have been shocked out of his shoes, Willie, because it would be like seeing, I don't know, one of the huge celebrities of the day, Zendaya, popping up in a riot and pushing a police officer back. And all he wanted to do was get the hell away from her, because wherever she is, there is press attention. And the police officers that day have covered up, some of them, their identifying numbers so that they can behave whatever way they want and there'll be no repercussions. Sophia, having pushed him off this woman and potentially saved her life, won't let it go. And she starts screaming at him, "Show me your number. Show me your number. Just show me your number." And he tries to melt into the crowd. She follows him. She's a nutter, right? You know, you score this as a win that you've saved this woman's life, but she is not having it. She wants to bring this man to justice. So she keeps following him through the crowd. She is getting tossed around like a rag doll and getting battered from all sides, but she won't stop. And she manages to get this policeman's number, V700, V700, and she repeats it and repeats it and repeats it. And finally, after 6 hours, these women are arrested. Sophia is one of them. I've seen the arrest record, but none of them are charged because the Home Secretary cannot afford to let these women tell their story of Black Friday
in court,
in front of the general public.
So how is this covered, Anita?
Well, I mean, it leads to a real sea change in public opinion because there are press, like I said, everybody was expecting a spectacle that day. So there are photographers and they see what is happening. There's one picture on the front page of the Daily Mirror of a suffragette called Ada Wright who's curled up on the ground with policemen looming over her and one man trying to protect her. And there are others of, you know, sort of these sticks. It's sort of very reminiscent of the lathi charges I described in India. You know, the policemen are sort of taking these long sticks and hitting these women. And these pictures are now public. So the mood, the tide starts to change a bit. They're still frightened of these annoying harridan women, but they have some sympathy. So when Sophia starts to complain about V700, because she does, let me tell you, she won't let it go. She escalates and escalates and escalates. And because she is someone, people are even entertaining her complaints. It gets to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner. It goes higher. It finally ends up with the Home Secretary. And I have seen a little note that he writes because he is so fed up with this woman. "Send no more reply to her. WSC. Winston Spencer Churchill." You can see where his pen angrily dug into the paper. It's fabulous, a fabulous
Brilliant
piece of historical ephemera.
So she now has a taste for this. She in our modern terms, we probably call her the beginnings of an activist. And her next thing is the tax resistance. In 1909, an organisation called the Women's Tax Resistance League has been founded. And of course, Sophia joins it immediately. She refuses to pay the tax on her servants. She refuses to pay the dog licence on her famous Pomeranians that she takes to Crufts. She refuses to pay the carriage licence. So she writes letters to the tax office. She tears up their demands. She tells them, "I shall pay no taxes until I'm allowed to vote. No taxation without representation." Quite right, Sophia.
Yeah. And you know, and when they then come for her, they basically, the bailiffs aren't going to let this go. You know, the tax office isn't going to let this go. They come in and they take her jewels. They turn up, they seize her jewels, which is really such an echo of the seizure of the Kohinoor from her father. All of these things will be completely, you know, sort of provocative to her. There's a wonderful thing that happens. Bailiffs turn up one day at the Faraday House. They've got this warrant. The housekeeper's opening the door, doesn't want to let them in, but they go sort of charging past her. They go upstairs. They take the lady's jewellery out, and it's going to, or this ring in particular is going to be auctioned off in Ashford. And what happens is that the suffragettes know this when this happens, and they fill all of the seats with suffragettes.
I love it.
And any man who is there, they sit on them. They sit on the men, or they sit behind them, growling in their ears, going,
"Don't get in the way of a suffragette."
"You better not." And this amazing woman, she's an artist. If you are an artist, you will know Louise Jopling Rowe, celebrated Victorian painter, friend of Oscar Wilde. She buys the ring, and she goes across the room at the end, and she hands it back to Sophia.
Brilliant.
And of course, the crowd goes mad, and the suffragettes unfurl their banners, and
It's a movie. It's a movie.
They hold this rally in the auction. I mean, it's fabulous. So yeah, she does that. She refuses to sign her census papers. She scrawls across it. You can go to prison for that as well. As women do not count, I refuse to be counted. She's just a pain. And this is all escalating. The bombing campaign of the suffragettes, when they're setting fire to things and destroying the contents of letterboxes, that's stepping up as well. People are worried that they are actually going to kill people because, they're ratcheting up their campaign. And then suddenly it all ends with the war, and the suffragettes, including Sophia, put down their demands. Sophia throws herself into the war effort. She becomes a nurse for those broken Indian soldiers coming back.
In the Brighton Pavilion, of all places, in this Indian-looking domed construction in Brighton. And that's now filled with wounded Indian soldiers from the trenches, and she goes and nurses them. And this is a quieter and more gentle and loving side of Sophia.
Well, she's maternal. She is the same woman who wanted to look after Eddie and look after her sisters and take care of everybody, but who's been forced into this situation of having to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. After the war, in 1918, the Representation of the People Act kicks in. Now, that means women over 30 with a property qualification will get the vote. Not full equality, not by any means. That won't come until 1928.
But quite a step forward.
Yeah, it's a breaking of a dam. You could definitely say that. And it is, and Sophia carries on sort of being prominent in the suffragette movement. Actually, if you go to Parliament Square, there is a suffragette statue, and her name is on it. So that's a recent addition, just sort of paying homage to what the women of this country and elsewhere owe women like Sophia. She lives a quiet life in Buckinghamshire.
I can't imagine anything that she does is completely quiet, but yeah.
No, she does. I mean, she does sort of take in refugees during the Second World War. She looks after them.
She's alive as late as the Second World War.
She absolutely is. And I have met two of them that she looked after.
God, this is such an extraordinary thing. So she vaults from the world of Ranjit Singh, which seems so very long ago, in the mid-19th century, right up to 1948, is it, when she finally dies?
She dies 22nd of August, 1948. So yeah, and, she sees the country that she loves, India, ripped in half. Her father's kingdom torn asunder. She's 72 years of age. She dies and leaves instructions for her funeral, which I think are very beautiful. I mean, the band is to play a full Wagner funereal march. It's a Christian funeral, but she is to be cremated afterwards, and her ashes are to be taken back to India.
Are they taken back to India?
Yes, they are, by Bamba, but we'll get to that in her sister Bamba's story. But one thing I just wanted to add, in her will, even though partition has unleashed the very worst of communal hatred among the Punjabis of India and what is now Pakistan, she leaves in her will, she divides between 3 girls' schools, a Hindu one, a Muslim one, and a Sikh one. And when in her life she was asked to give her entry for who's who, people bang on for ages about how clever and wonderful they are. She writes nothing at all, which is why she disappeared from history so comprehensively, because she was useless at blowing her own trumpet. She just gave one line under interests. She said, "The advancement of women." That's it. That's her entry, her name, and that. And that, in a nutshell, is Sophia, who's the most well-known of the sisters now, but was completely unknown not so long ago.
We have an equally extraordinary story, her sister Catherine. And she spends most of her adult life hundreds of miles from England in a German town called Kassel in Prussia with her intimate companion who happened to be her childhood governess.
And honestly, it's one of the regrets of my life that although I wrote about Catherine, I knew that there was more and that she deserved her own book. Never quite got round to doing it.
Not too late, Anita. I'd read it.
Thanks, Willie. It really is, in this whole Duleep Singh family history, this is one of the most tender relationships that I came across. And it is a love between two women. Now, whether it's sexual or not, we don't know because there are no Polaroids from the time. But we do know that these are two women who follow each other around the world and who never let go of each other's hands. Not even world war gets in their way. So this is the story that we're going to tell. Catherine comes from the same stock, the same tragic background that we discussed about Sophia, but she goes in a completely different direction, which takes her into Hitler's Germany.
Because in 1933, when Hitler comes to power, Germany begins its slide into Nazism, into racialized law, into war. And Catherine doesn't leave. She carries on in Prussia. She's in Kassel right through this, a brown woman cohabiting with another woman, an Indian princess, the sister of an army officer, living in the Third Reich.
I mean, let's go back to her story. She's older than Sophia. She's born in 1871 in Belgravia. She is, if you look at photographs of the three girls when they came out as debutantes, Sophia and her sisters were presented together before Queen Victoria, you will see Bamba, who's in the foreground, dark-skinned, fierce-eyed, not smiling at all, doesn't look very particularly happy to be there. Sophia, the youngest, the most anglicised, and you have Catherine in the middle, sort of standing above. And she is, I think, the most beautiful. She's got sort of the swan neck. She has this stillness about her face, sort of an enigmatic kind of smile about her. I do think they look a little like meringues, the three of them. But yes,
I think that was the style of the time. The meringues were very much on show.
But you just imagine sort of that brown skin against that white meringuage. It's quite something. Anyway, these children all develop very distinct personalities from a very young age. And you have sort of reports about them that they are constantly being spied on, and reports are constantly being sent back. And we have them.
Other sort of spies or governors or...
They have guardians. Lord Henniker is one of the guardians who looks after the children after both parents have died. And he is sort of the rubber stamping role in their lives. Whatever money is needed, he rubber stamps it. And he gets constant reports as well. And he talks about how once they've been removed from their malign family's influence, these are his words, they are very much improved in every way and are nice, presentable young ladies. Catherine is a very pretty child. The eldest Bamba is nice looking. I have great hopes that the management of them, poor neglected children, will turn out well. Catherine and Sophia were always considered the prettier of the three, and that's because they were light-skinned.
Even in modern India, that's still very much the prejudice. Anyway, yes, after Catherine and Sophia's mother dies in 1887 and her father effectively abandons the family and disappears off to dissolute life, ending up in a Paris hotel in a very tragic way, a small army of tutors are brought in to educate and, probably in the words of the time, probably to civilize the children. A drill sergeant from the local army camp who marches up and down and teaches them deportment, rather like the Von Trapps. A tutor who teaches them how to curtsy. And then, and this is the crucial addition to the family, a governess from Kassel in Hesse, Germany, Lena, is it Schaefer? Schaefer or
Schaefer? Schaefer. No, the umlaut says Schaefer. Yeah, and Lena is a kindly woman. She's described as being very kind, very gentle. She becomes a favourite with the children, and they are children, when she comes into their lives.
Is it because Queen Victoria is also German and that there's all these German relations?
Clever observation, because Queen Victoria believed that German governesses were the best because they had the discipline. And these girls, my goodness, needed some discipline in her view. There were reports that before she appointed guardians and Lena was sort of taken on board, that these girls were running feral in the streets. And so somebody had to come in and take them in control. And this is even at a time when, their mother, who I mentioned in the last episode was an alcoholic, had no care of them at all because she was not even able to care for herself.
This is very Von Trapp, as you say. This is very much sort of Sound of Music territory, with governesses turning up to teach them to learn German poetry and possibly sing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the hills are alive with the sound of Lena. She's 12 years older than Catherine. She's fluent in English. She's meant to teach the girls German. She's meant to keep an eye on them. But almost from the beginning, Catherine, who is about 16 when Lena arrives, is completely drawn to her, a limpet. She really relies on her. Now, you can understand why somebody wants a maternal figure when one is absent and you've gone through so much trauma. So I think definitely at that time, this is just a stable, kind, maternal woman in her life. So she's 17 when she goes up to Somerville College, which is a college in Oxford, the only one to take in women.
Where Indira Gandhi later went.
Exactly. And to read French and German. Now, look, this is what is unusual. When she is at Oxford, does this girl need a governess anymore? There are other children in the family who are younger who could probably have done with a governess, but Lena goes too. And she sort of stays in Somerville with Catherine and Bamba, who is already there. Tell us a little more about Somerville College, because apart from Indira Gandhi, it's, there's some interesting history here.
Somerville at this point is pretty new. It's founded in 1879. Women aren't allowed to graduate yet from Oxford. They can study and they can sit exams, be told what mark they would have got if they were men, but are not formally given degrees, which seems an incredibly sort of dog-in-the-manger attitude from Oxford. And Catherine and Bamba both go.
They do.
Why does Sophia not go?
Well, Sophia's too young, first of all,
right?
Because remember, she's younger. But also, there are letters which say it would be better to separate the older sisters from the younger, because while they're in the care of their guardians, this family called the Oliphants, there are lots of reports being sent back by Arthur Oliphant, who is looking after them, that say these two older ones speak very disloyally about the Queen and about the country. Sophia, she's delightful. She's really quiet. She hardly speaks. She barely looks you in the eye. She's great. We love Sophia.
She's into Pomeranian dogs, always a thing that appeals to British.
She wouldn't say boo to a goose. She's kind of pliable. But those two, not. And so that is why Queen Victoria didn't really care for university education for women, but signs off on the fact that, send them away, send them far, far away. So Lena just stays. She never leaves. Now, it's important to be careful. And, we don't want to sort of stamp modern categories. But my reading of their situation, having sort of spent over a decade with these girls, is that what kindles at Somerville, and which will go on for the next 40 years, is a relationship, a loving relationship. Don't know if it's sexual or not. Goodness knows. If you're not in the room, you don't know. But they love each other. Sophia's word for them is intimate. And we know, she's a great prude about sex. Huge prude. So any hint of impropriety would make her uncomfortable. But Bamba and Sophia never, ever question the fact that Catherine and Lena come in a package. That this is something that is so close that even the sisters, who are tremendously close, would not try to get in the middle of it. And Lena, who is all about Catherine, nothing really very much to do with Bamba or Sophia's life. It is Catherine, 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 and Catherine, and that is reciprocated between them.
It's really interesting territory, this. The world I grew up in a rather Edwardian Scottish seaside town, and there were lots of old spinsters cohabiting without raising any eyebrows at all, and who knows what their relationship was. Do we have letters or anything that are, unquestionably romantic between the two?
We don't have letters between them, unfortunately, and that is because of, I think, largely the war. Whatever ephemera was between them was lost at that time. I haven't seen them. If they do surface and, stuff keeps surfacing about these sisters, it would be amazing.
And if Sophia, who was prudish, doesn't see any hint of impropriety, is that evidence on the other side or not?
I would say, on the contrary, she wouldn't talk about it if they were.
And what's the legal situation at this point? Because obviously you've got lots of very draconian laws against male gay relationships. Oscar Wilde, and indeed my great-grandfather, had to leave the country for very similar reasons, ended up living in Italy at exactly this time. But presumably, I'd imagine that there was not similar laws for women because they would not have even entered the minds of people of this generation.
You're right. So lesbian relationships are not criminalised in England at this point. Male homosexuality totally is. So Oscar Wilde, you mentioned, in 1895, he receives a sentence of 2 years hard labour. The Ballad of Reading Gaol, a beautiful piece of poetry by Oscar Wilde, which I can quote boringly from, is written about that experience. But for women, there's no equivalence in law. The Victorian legal mind just simply couldn't get itself around the fact that women would do such a thing.
I love that. This is brilliant.
It's important to also, say that this is an aspect of queer history for women, full stop. That sometimes you have to read between the lines because it was so dangerous or so completely invisible to people around. And, unless you have the Polaroids or, as you say, sort of the love letters, you have to surmise. And there is, I think, just an overwhelming mountain of evidence that these two loved each other. They were
inseparable.
Have you seen the picture I sent you? She hated her time at Somerville. She couldn't wait to leave. She's a serious, quiet student. She's doing fine.
And she's studying German and French.
And Arthur Oliphant says, I feel sure the Queen will like to hear of Princess Catherine Duleep Singh having taken honours 3rd class at the close of her Oxford career. Princess Bamba, the elder of the two, has not been successful, I am sorry to say, because Bamba, doesn't want to be there either, but she's not even going to try. So she's just been sent into Somerville exile and is just sort of simmering away with her hockey stick. And with Catherine, actually does some work. As you said, neither gets a degree because Oxford won't award one to a woman until 1920. Catherine and Bamba are a whole generation before that change takes place. But Catherine does leave with an education that very few women of her generation have.
And then they go off on holiday. They go off on the grand tour with Lena.
Yeah, the grand tour is a thing that we learn about in school here in Britain. I think it's a European thing, isn't it? Where posh, stroke royal, stroke aristocratic people go off to discover Europe, and they spend months at a time travelling around Europe and the Mediterranean. And that's precisely what Catherine and Lena do.
The idea is it's a wider education rather than just learning about painting and history. There is this idea that you go and discover the world, and you go to the seedier parts of Italy, and you discover all that life has to offer, in inverted commas. And that is very much part of the package.
And Lena is delighted to be the one taking Catherine, and Sophia joins for part of the tour. And they go to Holland, they go to Germany, they go to Italy, Greece, Egypt. And, we've got some surviving fragments from a housekeeper, Margaret Mays, who's just really kind of unimpressed by the whole thing. She just wants to go home. It's, Germany.
Flat and boring.
Flat and boring, like all of Lena's, sort of passion and pleasure about showing the very best of her country. Is like Margaret May's like, yeah, can we go home now? Italy is wonderful and sort of opens their eyes and transforms Sophia in many ways, even more than Catherine. And then Egypt, where, they stand in front of the Sphinx and they think of their mother.
Yes, they have a family connection, don't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. Bamba, born in Alexandria. So both India and Egypt meant a lot to these girls because of the family connection with a mother that they really barely knew because life was so very hard when she was alive. Anyway, this trip, honestly, Willie, is the beginning of Catherine's life because she's seen Germany now through Lena's eyes. And very quietly, the secretive one, has resolved from that point that is where she wants to live. She's going to live in Germany. Now, this is like just sort of from left field. There are no family connections in Germany. There is nothing tying this family to Germany. The world is big. Italy is a lovely place. They loved Italy, but she chooses Germany and she chooses to go and set up home with Lena. She's a young woman. She's a lot younger than her governess.
What are their ages now? Sort of 20 and 32, is that right?
Something like that. So Kassel. Tell us about Kassel, because that will become the centre of Catherine's world.
Well, it's in Prussia. And it sits in the valley, surrounded by hills, lovely beech forests. One of those handsome, slightly chocolate boxy, prosperous, slightly sleepy German university towns that were very popular in this interwar period. And lots of British travellers go there and are enchanted by it in a way that, it isn't really part of a tourist itineraries anymore. It's also, interestingly, the place where Brothers Grimm, I think, collected a lot of their fairy tales and their folk tales.
So it's beautiful. And they're living, this chocolate box existence, which nobody can yank Catherine back from. There are letters that we do have between Sophia in particular saying, are you coming back? Can you come back? Are you going to come back? And she never does. She just stays there. And in fact, what she says is, why don't you leave that horrid place, Faraday House, that awful place? She hates it because both she and Bamba think that it is enemy territory. Because do you remember in the Sophia episode, I said that Grace and Favour apartments were handed out to heroes of the Raj, those who had taken a stand.
Yeah.
Just imagine it for Bamba and Catherine. They're wandering around with their brown skin, knowing that the people here who are rewarded.
Surrounded by what they might regard as war criminals.
War criminals, right, exactly. I mean, Sophia doesn't see this or doesn't want to see this and stays because, she has this need. I mean, I guess, she needs, she doesn't have a Lena.
It's not a bad spot to live. I mean, it's lovely to live in Hampton Court, yeah.
Gorgeous. But Lena, is the one that is the centre of Catherine's world. Whereas for Sophia, it is what she has known, which is Faraday House, Queen Victoria, and London life.
Do we have a picture of their life together? What are Lena and her getting up to all day?
So, yes, we have lovely letters from Catherine trying to tempt Sophia out because she's really worried that Sophia sometimes had an eating disorder from time to time, saying, you just really have to come. Come and let Lena cook for you. Lena restores everything. Just come and we'll look after you. The air is so delightful here, she says. Yeah, excellent. Miss S's German food is too good for any words. But, she's sort of watching from afar when Sophia starts kicking up all hell as a suffragette. She's sort of like slightly bemused, but she is supportive because she starts sending money. She starts financially supporting the less militant suffragettes. And she starts sort of sending money to Millicent Fawcett, saying, actually, yes, absolutely, women's rights matter to her as well. Now, one may wonder if that's something to do with the fact that she has this intimate relationship, as Sophia called it, with a woman that is not even noticed and could be criminalised at some point in time. So that is where they stay. And then, Willie...
First World War breaks out. She's on the wrong side of the line as far as Britain's concerned. So how do they negotiate that?
Well, how do they negotiate it? I mean, poorly, one might say, because she's a British citizen. She's refusing to leave Lena and refusing to leave Germany. Lena wouldn't be able to leave Germany even if she wanted to because, she's an enemy alien. So Catherine decides, even though she has every right to come back to England, that she's not going to do it. And there are lots of reports that suggests that Sophia is beside herself and wants to get her out. Sir James Dunlop Smith is a bigwig at the India Office in London, and Sophia is bombarding him with letters saying, can we just get her out? But, Catherine doesn't want to go. Princess Sophia says, Dunlop Smith has just called to ask if anything can be done for her sister, Princess Catherine. When last heard, she was in Wilhelmshohen Castle, Prussia. She was living with a German lady. And he also writes, an intimate friend. And her sister is not at all clear whether she wishes to leave Germany. Well, she didn't want to leave Germany, and that is where she stays. And Catherine writes to Sophia because, it's really hard to get letters across. And bear in mind that Victor has signed up to join and fight in the war. I mean, he's actually sort of too fat and grand to do anything useful, but he's part of the yeomanry. But Catherine's letter to Sophia is intercepted. It's a secret letter. Dear Soph, it's awful having no news of you. I'm perfectly all right here. You must not be anxious in any way. It's just the same as in times of peace. Perfect order everywhere. No sort of restrictions for me. There have been no murders or disturbances by Germans in Germany, and the destruction of property in their enemy countries has simply been just punishment of civilians who've taken part in war. I implore, and then she does a little star symbol because she's trying to be cryptic, to have nothing to do with this unjust war against Germany from your loving sister Catherine. Now that star symbol represents Victor. So, just tell them not to fight. She's basically suborning treason is what she's doing because of this love that she has not only for Lena, but her country.
And this, as we'll see later, this letter is noted, isn't it?
Absolutely noted and held very much against Catherine.
This is a period of censorship and all letters coming in and out of Germany are going to be opened by the authorities. And we know that they read this and put it in a file.
They did, and they also put their assessment in that same file on Catherine, saying that she was decidedly pro-German in her sentiments, but not a serious threat. So just leave her to rot in Germany. That's it. And they sort of kept a closer eye on the sister in Hampton Court, who is right under their nose. So she stays there. She stays throughout the naval blockade of German ports.
Interesting that she doesn't get interned or anything like that the Germans are just happy to let her carry on in her village with her friend.
Women are invisible, and she wasn't deemed a threat in Germany. She's very pro-German. Why would they? Why would they round her up? She's very much on side. And she stays during the blockade. She stays while German civilians are starving. You know, the turnip winter, the Germans refer to it as this period of great hardship where hundreds of thousands die of malnutrition and disease.
Der Rübenwinter, the turnip winter.
But finally, because she starts getting very sick, Sophia manages to win the day and gets her out.
There is a finite number of turnips that we can all eat in a year.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a really sad story. Catherine's starving by 1918. Lena is seriously ill. So Sophia just moves heaven and earth to get her out. And she gets her out through a really circuitous way on Armistice Day itself. The Dutch embassy in Berlin gets this urgent request to create a passport for the Duleep Singh princess, and Catherine gets out. They're so surveilled. They're just girls, right? But the letters are from the most senior members of government. So Edwin Montagu, the Secretary of State of India.
Edwin Montagu is one of the more liberal figures in a cabinet not known for its advanced racial views, I think it's fair to say. And he's very keen on Indian independence, and he's very anti-Zionist, in contrast to his cousin, Herbert Samuels, who was the first British governor of Mandate Palestine.
And he gets a lot of flack just for being Jewish. They dub him Edwin Montagu on the opposition benches. It's an awful amount of barracking. But when he hears that Sophia is trying to get her sister back, he writes, I hardly think we're in a position to make difficulties. Quite early in the war, we intercepted a foolish pro-German letter from Princess Catherine, but so far as I know, nothing has been heard of her since. It may be hoped she has found occasion to modify her views. In any case, there seems to be no sufficient evidence for treating her as an enemy. So, you know, that's the level of consideration that is going on. And so she's allowed back. Sophia nurses her back to health. But the moment the borders open, what does she do? She runs straight back to Lena. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, so Lena's still there. They're separated at this point.
Lena can't get out. She's a German. How can she get out? So she's just there. So Catherine goes straight back to her. And throughout the 1920s, throughout the Weimar years, that is where she stays. They describe themselves, Catherine writes to Sophia, saying, we are just happy little church mice. We're wandering around and having the most wonderful time.
This is the world of Babylon Berlin, which is one of my favourite ever TV shows. You watched it, of the Weimar years in Germany, with all the amazing things going on, including all sorts of relationships between same sexes and so on. Something we just don't associate with 20s and 30s Germany.
Cabaret and things like that. It's that sort of period that we're talking about. So she stays and she's happy and she's living with Lena and they are having a marvellous time. And they are, you know, they're just domestic bliss in this beautiful place. And then we know what happens in the 1930s. Hitler
becomes Chancellor in 1933 and within 12 months, effectively a dictator, and everything goes to hell in a handcart. He takes the title Führer in 1934. Nuremberg laws strip German Jews of their citizenship in 1935. Brown shirt violence in the streets. But none of this is yet in Kassel, which is still sort of half-timbered cottages and cuckoo clock houses sitting there with Bierhofs and all the rest of it in Prussia.
Yeah, but it's getting closer. So, you know, by the year 1938, you know, things are really heating up. You've just had the Anschluss in March, you know, that time when the German troops crossed into Austria.
My mother and grandmother were in Austria at the time of the Anschluss, and my grandmother did several journeys back and forth smuggling Jewish Austrians out of the country in the boot of her Rolls Royce.
Hold that thought. It may be pertinent in a little while. So the Nazis are pushing into the Sudetenland throughout the summer. Is busy stoking those grievances of ethnic Germans in Czechoslovakia. He's pushing Europe to the brink of war. He gets to Munich by September. And it is getting closer and closer. And you've got this sort of 66-year-old Indian princess and her German partner, Aryan German, in her 70s, beloved of the local community. But Lena is Catherine's shield. You know, as long as she's around.
Oh, this wonderful picture. I've just seen the picture you sent.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful.
Isn't it gorgeous?
There's quite an age difference between them. Lena's looking now quite grandmotherly with sort of furs over her thick winter coat. And Catherine's looking thoroughly Punjabi with a little sort of teapot hat on her head.
A teapot hat and those little sort of Punjabi cheeks that we all get eventually. Yeah, the little pouch cheeks. But, look how happy they look. Look how comfortable they look.
They do, don't they? This is where there is some new research, an element of the story we knew nothing about until recently. The fact that Catherine is quietly helping Jewish families escape.
When I was talking to Sophia's goddaughter, she told me that she had a distinct memory, she was a little girl, of, she called them the dirty people arriving at Hampton Court. And she described people who had come off the coal barges, had been smuggled into the night into Faraday House, and that where they were washed, cleaned, fed, and then sent on their way. And I said, well, who are they? That's a really weird memory. And she said, well, I think they were Jews that were being helped out of Germany by Catherine and then sent to Sophia. And I thought, well, this is amazing.
His sisters running their own sort of Schindler escape network.
Underground Railroad. Exactly right. Thank goodness a historian called Peter Bunce, who is a fabulous Duleep Singh archivist, has gone through much research. And he has been following, sort of chasing down the story of what he calls the Indian Schindler. So, we should say Schindler saved 1,200 lives. Peter gave an interview to Deutsche Welle not so long ago saying, saving one life or saving 10 lives is still saving. You're saving somebody who's not your colour, not your religion, not your ethnic background, but you're doing it based on humanity. What was she doing? So she was acting as a guarantor. British refugee policy in the 1930s is misunderstood. It wasn't an open door policy. It wasn't even remotely generous.
And a lot of the same people who are encouraging emigration to Palestine are absolutely raising the barriers to stop Jewish families escape into Britain with great heartlessness.
So, at that time, the government would only admit Jewish refugees from Germany if there was a British citizen, and preferably a British citizen of note, who would sign a paper saying this person would not become a burden on the state. I will house them, I will feed them, I will pay for them. And without a signature, the visa is refused. So, this is entirely dependent on private generosity. No sponsor, no entry. And Catherine, with her British passport and her royal title, buys an empty manor house in Buckinghamshire, remotely, although she really doesn't want to ever go back to Buckinghamshire, doesn't want to leave Germany. There's no way she wants to leave. She will provide for all. And it is Peter who's really found the first family that she saves. And their story is really lovely. It's extraordinary. It begins in a doctor's waiting room in Kassel in 1938. Catherine's just sitting there, another woman sitting, they're chatting. And the woman is Ilse Hornstein. Her husband's a Jewish lawyer. He's a decorated First World War veteran. He's just been arrested by the Gestapo, and he's been sent to a awful SS camp called Sachsenhausen. And their plight looks desperate. By the late 30s, tens of thousands of political prisoners, Jewish men, are rounded up and they're being kept in the most horrific conditions.
And Ilse has two young children, doesn't she? Klaus, George, and Ursula. And she doesn't know if her husband's alive. He's last seen heading into this camp with the SS, not looking good. And she has no idea how to get out. And in a doctor's waiting room in Kassel, she finds herself sitting next to an Indian princess, as one does. And Catherine just offers immediately, according to the family, she will be the guarantor to get them into the UK. She will sponsor their British visas. They can stay at her house in Buckinghamshire, a perfect stranger to a Jewish family she has known for 10 minutes. That speaks very, very well of her. Presumably also this could go wrong with the Nazi authorities who she's living among.
Well, really, it's something of a red flag for the Nazis. Wilhelm gets out of Sachsenhausen partly because the camp is overcrowded and they're releasing prisoners on condition that they get out of Germany immediately. So he leaves with absolutely nothing. Ilse and the children leave. They are carried on Catherine's largesse. Sophia collects them. I guess they might be the coal people that her goddaughter remembers. And then they are put up in this place in Buckinghamshire where they are allowed to live. And they're not the only ones, because Catherine acts as a guarantor for at least 6 other people that we know about. There's Wilhelm Meyerstein, a physician, his partner, Marie-Louise Wolf, the violinist, Alexander Polinaroff. Now, I know about him because Drovna remembered him playing in the drawing room of Hampton Court. Polinaroff.
Who's this that's remembering?
So this is a woman I interviewed for the book who was a living link with Sophia, which just tells you how recent all this stuff, women fighting for the vote, actually is. So she remembers growing up in Faraday House And as a young girl, in the evening, this wonderful violinist called Polnareff is playing for the family. And there's another family, there's the Reich family, there's the Gertmans. And Peter Bunce, like I said, is leading the investigation on this, and he's done really well. But he thinks there's a much longer list than this. And actually, there's a lovely thing that Peter talks about, that in 2002, after reading a local newspaper article, somebody turned up in his office and said, my mother and my uncles and my grandparents were saved by Princess Catherine in Germany. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be alive today. A spine-tingling moment. This carries on, Catherine playing saviour at this time, but then something happens to her and she herself needs to be saved, okay? Because Lena dies. So it's just weeks before Kristallnacht, August 1938.
So when things are getting really hairy, race riots in the streets.
It is proper sort of fiery torches in the street. And her neighbours, Catherine's neighbours, say to her, you've got to go. You've got to get out of here. There's no one here to defend you now. Lena's not here to defend you. We can't protect you. You are brown. Get out, get out, get out. She's 67 years old. She's left alone for the first time in 50 years. And you'd think that her reaction would be, I need to go. There's nothing here for me. Lena's buried in Kassel. So she doesn't want to go. And, you know, we do have the account from a neighbour of hers, a doctor called Fritz Ratig. He's constantly worried about her. He keeps begging her to leave, but she doesn't want to leave Lena. Lena's in the ground. She doesn't want to leave Lena. Good sense prevails. And, you know, this foreign-born woman in an unconventional relationship, friends with Jewish families, who's been smuggling Jews out of the country, gets out. And she arrives in England via Switzerland in November 1938 and goes to Faraday House, the place she hates most in the world, in Hampton Court. She can't stand it. She moans and groans about Sophia's constant smoking and her numerous dogs. The whole place stinks.
Do they have an edgy relationship?
They have a lovely relationship. These sisters love each other.
Because those letters were very loving, but she doesn't like the dogs, doesn't like the cigarettes.
She loves her sisters. She absolutely adores Sophia, but she cannot stand the pups and cigs. You know, it's the pups and cigs that are just driving her up the wall. So she then goes to this house in Penn in Buckinghamshire, Coalhatch House.
Which she's never been to before. She's bought blind.
Was this sort of way station for the Jewish families that she was rescuing. And then she sets about decorating it in a modern European style, very much reminiscent of Castle, you know, ornamental garden, orchard. It's all of the things that she and Lena had together. And, you know, for a while, she's happy. She even tempts. During the Blitz, Sophia refuses to leave London. Even though there are bombs falling around Hampton Court, she's sort of smoking furiously out the window, going, I'm not going anywhere. And Catherine just says, would you please? I cannot lose somebody else. So she does, very miserably, go to Buckinghamshire in a little house that Catherine arranges, which is across the road from Coalhatch, so that they don't have to have the stumbling block of the dogs and the cigarettes.
And the dogs come too? All the Pomeranians?
Of course the dogs come too. And Sophia also takes in sort of evacuees and, you know, she's doing her own bit of, you know, saving the world. You've got happiness for a while, beautiful happiness. Catherine feels useful, you know, as well as sort of making this house beautiful. She is constantly sending letters, writing to MPs, trying to arrange passage for other German Jews who need to get out.
And also, I think she is busy sorting out the business of Germans who've been interned in Britain.
Really good point, because that's another bit of history that people don't really think about. If you were German, even if you were a recently arrived German Jew,
An anti-Nazi.
And had been imprisoned for such, you would be rounded up and you would be put in an internment camp. In fact, I did a documentary about an unknown, it's sort of, you know, the equivalent of a Guantanamo Bay. Isle of Wight had an enormous amount of interred Germans. So what you had there, you know, you had sort of German Nazi sympathisers corralled with Jews who'd escaped Nazi Germany. It was so mad. But there was no other way. You know, they didn't know who was a spy and who wasn't a spy. And some of these people were taken to Australia and dumped in the middle of the Australian outback. It's a fabulous story. And I will ask our wonderful producer to put the link to the documentary if it's still around, because it opened my eyes. I'm really proud of it. Catherine does this. Sophia is living her life. And Catherine then dies on the 8th of November, 1942. She's never got over the death of Lena. And she's exhausted by all her efforts of fighting the state, either the German state or the British state, and it just takes its toll. And it's Sophia who finds her. I found her lying on the floor on her back. It evidently happened when she was getting up. The doctor said it was quite painless and instantaneous and nothing could have been done. A lot of blood on the heart. You can imagine. An awful shock to me. It completely stunned and stupefied me, says Sophia. I couldn't shake myself into ordinary things. And she's cremated. And one wonderful aspect of this is all she wanted was to go back to Lena. Just take my remains back to Lena. Bamba, who's like sort of the Rottweiler who we're going to meet in the next episode, who's like the custodian. They're all mine. My sisters are mine. And she understood there was this decency of returning Catherine to the woman that she loved, to Lena Schaefer.
It's a very nice, touching note. I desire that a quarter of my ashes be buried as near as possible to the coffin of my friend Fraulein Lena Schaefer.
Eventually, it does happen when they're able to travel. The rest, so Bamba's normally the custodian of grief at this time when her sisters die, and she's the one who arranges everything, even though she may not have approved, she did it. And there is a beautiful moment. It's just lovely. And in Castle, the only memory that we have is that she's near Lena. That's it.
Anita, you are going to introduce us to the one who went home to India.
We're going to meet, I think she's going to be your favourite, Bamba, the queen. You like a difficult woman.
She sounds pretty stroppy to me.
Yeah, I think you like a stroppy woman.
Yeah.
Testament to that is this podcast. But look.
I would say so. I wasn't going to say anything.
No, I'll say it for you. It's okay. Self-styled Queen of the Punjab, Bamba Duleep Singh, later Bamba Sutherland.
I like the fact that she has a good Scottish connection. The Scots and the Punjabis, both good whiskey drinkers, both great dancers. There's a good essay to be written on Scots-Punjabi connections. But anyway, we won't go there quite yet.
Well, this is the episode for you then. Like, Bamba is the eldest of the Duleep Singh sisters. She's born in London in 1869. She dies in Lahore in Pakistan in 1957.
57?
Yeah, not that long ago.
Within living memory, not that long ago at all.
So I should clarify, there are two Bambas in this story. There is Maharani Bamba, her mother, the one who Duleep Singh married.
Half German, half Ethiopian.
Indeed, and the one who he finds in the Cairo mission. And then there is Princess Bamba, who we're talking about today.
Who is a beauty, as we discovered last time. She's the most beautiful of the sisters.
See, do you think she's... I think she's ferociously beautiful, but she wasn't deemed to be beautiful in her day because she was darker skinned. I mean, terrible, but true.
That's still not just then. Today in India, the same prejudice is very much around.
Yeah, I mean, look, the story of Bamba, in a nutshell, is this is a woman who refused to ever accept what the British did to her father. And eventually she will go and try and reclaim her father's stolen kingdom.
Brilliant.
Honestly, it's very quixotic though, like a tilting in the wind. She buys a house 5 minutes walk from Lahore Fort, and she will stay there throughout the rise and the fall of the British in India, through partition, through the creation of Pakistan, and that is where she dies. And that is where she is buried.
It's another fantastic story, and again, quite different from the others. I think you've got to do a new edition of your book, Anita.
Do you think? No, 3-volume.
Excavate all this new material. Yeah.
Oh, I finished the book that I've been commissioned to write first. It's only 5 years late. Oh dear. So Bamba was born on the 29th of September, 1869. And she's born in Knightsbridge, and the third child of Maharaja Duleep Singh and Bamba Mula, the mother, after whom she's named.
What does it mean, Bamba? Arabic for pink?
Pink, that's right, yeah, because the reason that Bamba, the mother, was given the nickname is because she was so shy and so retiring that she blushed whenever she was noticed, and that's why people called her Bamba. But this is a Bamba who's going to spend the whole of her life trying to be noticed and kicking up merry hell. Let me tell you what kind of child she is. Okay, so she is, when I told you in the last couple of episodes that the children were constantly under surveillance, and you have reports that are being sent to Queen Victoria about how they're getting along because Queen Victoria stepped into the vacuum left by mother and father. And you've got Victor Imperius, will become a terrible, incurable gambler. Freddie, obstinate, Catherine secretive. Princess Bamba described as having the worst temper in the nursery, noted from the age of 3. And, you can understand that as well, Willie, because, the father spends so many months away from his family. When he comes home, he ignores his wife, barely plays with his children. But what she does take from him are the stories about India, about the Golden Temple, about the Lahore Fort, about their grandmother, Jindal, and their grandfather, Ranjit Singh, the Lion of Punjab. And, the sisters receive these in very different ways. Bamba takes them straight into her heart. They are her birthright. Whereas Catherine, her mind is in the land of the Grimm's fairy tales, and with Lena, doesn't really care so much about them.
But it's specifically the fact that he's been dispossessed, isn't it? That really irritates and obsesses Bamba, and not without reason.
No.
He's lost the richest kingdom in India, and all the jewels and all the land and all the everything, and they are now living in grace and favour mansions, father absent, and no wonder that this is something that she regrets and thinks back on.
It is an unvirtuous circle because she hates the British, and she's the one who decides to refer to Queen Victoria as Mrs. Fagin, as her father did, the receiver of stolen goods, always irked by what was taken from the family. And that sort of disdain is returned and some by Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria really doesn't like Bamba. She is difficult. Catherine is weird. They are not her goddaughters. They're not her problem. But she kind of looks after them as, light-handedly because of Sophia, the one that she really does care for. And Bamba feels this. Who is there to love Bamba apart from her sisters? She is the least favoured in the family, but all she has are her sisters. She loves them dearly. They are a proper sort of, fingers on a fist. Together they can do anything, but they are against the world. That is her psychology. So you need to understand that straight away.
Now, in the last episode, we saw Catherine and Bamba go to Oxford, but Bamba doesn't prosper there at all, does she? Doesn't bother, can't be asked to do the exams and leaves without a degree of any sort. Any
accolade at all. No,
yeah.
No. And she's kind of sort of dismissed as being something of an idiot. Catherine managed to get her degree, although you couldn't get a degree. She passed her exams. Bamba, I'm afraid to say, did not prosper, is what was reported. But this is not to suggest, and I will give you evidence, that this woman was stupid. She wasn't. On the contrary, she was really intelligent. She just did not want to do what she was told.
And is there a feeling that she's straining against the establishment even at Oxford? Is it that she doesn't like these English dons and just wants to tell them to piss off?
She doesn't like to be told what to do.
Full stop.
That's it. She probably, and again, this is Willie's supposition because we don't have it in her words, but you see it in the photographs, right? You see the scowl.
She has a very imperious scowl, yeah.
She never smiles in any of these photographs from Somerville. She's annoyed. And I think what it was is that, people were trying to treat her like a puppet, and she wanted to cut the strings. She, as the granddaughter of Ranjit Singh, wanted to decide what she did. She wanted to decide what her future was. And at the turn of the century, she does something genuinely surprising. She announces that she wants to be a doctor. Now, that's what I mean about somebody who's unintelligent wanting that. Those things don't marry up at all. So I think you've got a very keen mind who just, didn't want to do it. I don't want to do the things I don't want to do. But when it's her own idea, when she can leave England and do something else, that is what she does. So 1899, this is the 1900s, remarkable that a woman wants to be a doctor, that she has that kind of ambition.
And she wants to go to America to study there.
Well, ideally she wants to go to India, but the British will never let her go there. Catherine and Sophia understand that. Having a Duleep Singh on the loose in India is everybody's nightmare here in London, because you become a focus point for all of the malcontents in Punjab, right? So they don't want her there.
And throughout the whole of British Indian history, deposed royals are moved around to keep them away. And so you have Bahadur Shah Zafar, the Mughal emperors we saw in our Mutiny series, sent off to Burma. The King of Burma sent off to India, anywhere but where they should be and where they can stir up resentment against the Raj. So, yeah, she's got a point.
She can't go to India. The only option really, is America. In the English-speaking world, it is the only place where a woman can realistically get a medical degree.
Could she not do it in England, or just doesn't want to do it there?
There are no medical degrees. Look, Elizabeth Garrett Anderson broke through in 1865 getting a medical licence, but she had to get it through the back door of the Society of Apothecaries, and then the society changes its rules. It is really very, very difficult. And she doesn't want to stay here anyway. So on the 30th of January 1900, Bamba books passage on a ship called the König Albert, a German ocean liner bound for the Far East. Seems to be wanting to travel to San Francisco via Japan in 1900. But, we know about her arrival in America because the American press love a royal. They loved a royal then, and they love a royal now.
They do, as we've seen lately, exactly.
So, they're willing to love her. There are reporters waiting at the pier for the König Albert to dock, and they are waiting to be charmed by the Indian princess from the Far East, exotic. What they get is something quite different.
She's not playing. She is not game for this
not
at all.
bloody playing at all. This is what they write. A dark, timid-looking woman of small stature who was the object of much attention on the pier was Princess Bamba Duleep Singh. She had a large assortment of baggage, beside 2 fine dogs, one a Great Dane named Leon, the other a beautiful cream-colour Russian wolfhound, the name of which she refused to divulge. And then when they ask her, they report that she just screams at them, "Leave the dogs alone and don't you put anything in the paper about them either." So she's not playing at all. Like, she just hates it.
Interestingly, the whole dog thing is again a continuity, because Jinden's, their grandmother's father, had been the kennel keeper.
Kennel keeper's daughter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Echoes of the past.
And we know that Sophia does these Pomeranians, but she has more my kind of dog. I love the idea of a big Russian wolfhound. Enormous beasts.
Well, I mean, Sophia also, she goes from Pomeranian to Borzois. If you like a big dog, she's into the Borzois as well. And she wins crofts with them as well. But look, Bamba, for a brief moment, is magnificent in Chicago. She's living on West Adams Street. She is going to the Women's Medical College every day, one of the few non-white women in American medicine in 1901, fewer than 1,000 medical students in the entire country. But you know what? It is hard.
Again, an extraordinary story in itself, this.
Yeah.
Even without all the other stuff. It's just amazing.
I'm so glad you think so. Delighted.
You should write a book in it.
Okay.
Now, anyone that's been to Chicago knows that it is effing cold in winter. The winds blow off the lake, notorious Chicago freezing winds, and it gets to, 14, 15 below zero. In winter. Streets are unpaved, frozen mud. And she is, in a sense, the first South Asian woman of many today trying to qualify as a doctor in the United States.
Yeah, you can't move for tripping over Indian women doctors these days, but it was a very rare unicorn sighting in those days. And what makes it worse, the weather was bad. And remember, she hated the weather in England as well. But
and this is worse. Yeah.
The locals are unkind to her as well, because, she's not charmed the press. She hasn't got them on side. And her walks to the medical college are torture. Again, there are reports in the paper of how she's complained because she's pelted with lumps of snow on her way to the college, and she sort of shouts at the press.
And it's a rough place, Chicago,
yeah,
at this point, isn't it? This is presumably Al Capone's already in business at this point. It's not a safe or easy place to be living.
I think Al Capone comes a lot later, but you get the idea. It is not the nicest place for her. And the press, instead of sort of taking her side and saying, this is really outrageous treatment, can we just treat our guest a bit nicer, they just really revel in breaking into her rooms, describing what's in her knicker drawers, and also writing about her losing her rag with the locals. She sort of screams at the press, that when she's pelted with the snow, or she's asked about the snow pelting, she goes, "Such things would never be permitted in England. I shall leave Chicago. I've never encountered such rude people in my life." So you can see, she's just full of rage and anger most 23 out of the 24 hours of the day. But she sticks it out for almost 3 years, she does.
But does she complete her course? Does she become a doctor?
Well, God, William, she does complete her coursework. She's about or she should be, graduating with her medical qualification. But in the summer of 1902, the trustees of Northwestern University decide in all their wisdom that women, full stop, cannot be doctors after all.
So she's gone right through this training and then they've sort of taken it all away.
Yeah, women cannot grasp surgery. That is a direct quote from the university. So she sails back to England in June 1902, completely defeated. You know, Catherine had her escape route through Lena. Sophia is happy to sit in Faraday House. She can't understand it, but okay, so be it. She does not want to be there. So, you know, whatever her rage was, it's now burning with the fire of a white hot sun. She comes back, but she has an attitude problem right from the beginning. And there are reports of her just being very rude and demanding around Faraday House about where and when she should be allowed to leave, how people talk to her. She keeps complaining about life there.
Does her sister resent her being rude to everybody? Do they get on?
So her sister finds her tricky but loves her. And her sister will actually push back against, because Bamba, when she comes back into Sophia's life, keeps telling her, you cannot trust these white people. You can't trust them. You cannot. Why are you friends with them? Why are you going to these parties? Why are you so happy that you're in their magazines? They hate us. And she keeps saying, no, they don't hate us. They don't hate us. Look, can't you just be a bit easier? But she's loyal to Bamba. She's never going to leave her sister's side. Like I said, these sisters have an unusually close bond. So do you remember I told you about the Delhi Darbar of 1902, which radicalizes Sophia?
You did. Now, whose idea is this to go off uninvited to the Delhi Darbar and present themselves? Is this Bamba's own idea?
It's Bamba's idea. It's Bamba who says, I don't care if the Secretary of State is not going to let us. We're going anyway. So nobody's surprised that this is, you know, some fool plan from the really awkward sister.
She's her father's daughter.
She's great, but she gets so much further than he did. And when she goes to India, when she goes to Lahore, you know, standing in the Shalimar Gardens where her father played as a boy, going to the Golden Temple in Amritsar, you know, she decides she is staying here. She is going to live and die here and, you know, stuff it to anyone who doesn't want her to do that.
And I mean, with good reason, in that not only is it home, it's one of the great cities of the world. And Lahore, you and I have been together in Lahore, and it's one of the greatest places to live. I'd love to live in Lahore.
Yeah.
Shalimar Bagh, gorgeous, the Mall, the gorgeous museum, the Jadugar, the Zamzam gun sitting on its plinth on the road. I'd move to Lahore in a flash. Anyway, she does.
She does. So when Sophia comes back to see her, because Sophia's trying to say, why are you staying there? Why don't you just come home? Because Sophia misses her. You know, Catherine's gone off with Lena. She's all on her own. She keeps begging her to come back. And Bamba keeps saying, not on your Nelly. I'm not going anywhere. If you want to see me, come and see me. But then more alarmingly, she writes to Sophia, who doesn't want to go to Lahore, doesn't have that connection with Lahore yet. She writes and says, I think the British are trying to kill me. I'm really ill and I think they're trying to poison me. And that's when Sophia does go and visit her and sort of tries to put her back on her feet and try to understand.
And presumably there's no truth in this, is there?
Well, no, I don't think there is. But Bamba definitely thought there was. And Sophia, who turns up thinking that Bamba is nuts, then starts to believe actually there is a conspiracy against her sister. People are being cruel to her every day. It is not beyond a stretch of imagination that she's being followed, because Sophia sees that they're being followed and surveilled. But poisoning, I don't think so. I don't think so. And I don't think Sophia thought so as well.
But what's her status? Because as we saw, her father was actually physically taken off the ship at Aden. They haven't done this to her. They've let her land. They may be following her, they may be being rude to her, but they haven't actually sort of, I mean, is she allowed to just arrive and settle there by the Raj authorities?
They let her. They let her be because they figure by this time, you know, there's not, what's the worst that can happen?
Everyone's forgotten about them.
Everyone's forgotten about them. But what they don't realise is everyone hasn't forgotten about them, and particularly the nationalists haven't forgotten. So people like Gopal Krishna Gokhale, who is the teacher of Gandhi, the reason Gandhi comes back to India, he comes to pay his respects. hugely.
Important figure in the Indian National Congress in the turn of the century.
Lala Lajpat Rai, who's this firebrand, who is the very genesis of this idea of Swadeshi, that, we will make our stuff, we will sell our stuff, and we will keep the profits. Self-reliance is what Indians need, and deplores the depredations going on, the colonial depredations in the country. So she starts mixing with those people, and it's through her that Sophia meets these radicals, as they would have been called in those days, and becomes politicized. There is one gorgeous moment, and I'll just tell you very briefly, but you like a feisty woman. And I think we did cover this in our episode with Ram Gua when we talked about Gandhi and some of the women in his circle. Sophia comes back after a ride, and she comes back to the home that Bamba has set up in Lahore, the Palms, very near Shalimar Gardens.
Next to the Shalimar Gardens, which is exactly where I would settle, the Palms.
Yeah. So there she is. Bamba's not at home. She's at some mystery meeting, because Bamba does keep disappearing off of mystery meetings while Sophia is there. And she sees this woman waiting patiently on the veranda. And she's obviously blown away, because she writes about it in her diary, but she writes with such care that it took a long time for me to unravel who she was, because I thought, why has she made such an impression? This woman who is referred to as a nice Bengali woman and is referred to only by a very innocuous name, which then I sort of traced back and is actually linked to Sarla Devi Chaudhrani, who is a firebrand revolutionary.
That's a match for Bamba. These two will get on.
Yeah, a very dangerous woman is what they call her. To the point where, and again, go back and listen to our Gandhi episodes, my friends, she runs training camps for Indians to learn how to do battle with the British. And she does these sort of meditations where people come and sit and they have to chant the name of revolutionaries, including, although, he wasn't a revolutionary, the grandfather of Bamba, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, the Maharaja of the Punjab. So, Sarla Devi is a huge figure in the resistance movement of the day, and from a really interesting lineage as well.
Niece of Tagore.
Yeah, the Nobel laureate, Rabindranath Tagore, absolutely. So, she's from a very posh family. Anyways, so you get the idea who Bamba is running with. There is an interesting thing that Bamba does that none of the other sisters do. Really, really strange. She gets married. And she gets married to a man. Well, the way she announces it to her family, Willie, is really very weird. In 1915, so it's the middle of the First World War, she sends a telegram to her family, and in it she writes, "I should now be addressed as Princess Bamba Sutherland," because she's married a Scotsman. Well, Australian by birth, but a Scotsman. Okay, so tell us a little bit about Colonel David Waters Sutherland.
So, this is Lieutenant Colonel David Waters Sutherland, Australian by birth, Scottish by ethnicity, born in Victoria, 1871, son of a gold miner, interestingly. And he's come up through the Indian Medical Service. He is the Honourable Surgeon to the Viceroy of India. But what is extraordinary is that this isn't some sort of handsome Punjabi chap that you might expect to marry some revolutionary. He is white establishment. Absolutely straightforward Raj central casting. What's she doing with it, Anita? How has this happened?
So Bamba has always said throughout her life that she's only attracted to Indian men and Indian people. She also tries to arrange the marriage of Sophia on one of her visits. It's hilarious the way Sophia talks about, these completely inappropriate Indian men that Bamba keeps throwing at her. She has disdain of English-speaking white people, but then she suddenly marries this Australian colonial doctor 20 years older than her as well. And the reason is twofold. It's money and it's legitimacy to stay in Lahore. So there is a proviso.
But there's rich Punjabis around in Lahore. She could have done that.
Well, she can't get to her own money. So her gripe was that, they were given a pittance and there's a mountain of money that rightfully belongs to her family. And when her father dies, there is a provision that is made by the British government that the girls will get a certain amount of money, a stipend. But if two of them marry, they will get a dowry. Okay, so it's about £10,000 worth of dowry. They only do this for Catherine and Bamba. And I was trying to understand why they would put that in, a huge amount of money for Catherine and Bamba. And I sort of think it's because they thought they would never marry because they were so difficult and so useless. But Sophia might marry someone quite useful, and so she didn't need it. So they felt free to put it in. Bamba was always trying to get her hands on the money, but she had to get married to have it.
And do we know what kind of marriage this was? Was there any closeness in this couple? Do they like each other? What's the...
Well, so again, I mean, they liked each other, but whether it was a real marriage, I've heard it suggested, and by other historians who toil in this field, that this was a marriage of convenience, that, you know, he was away so much. There are no children. You know, he's busy, she's busy.
Is he terribly good looking, or do we have any pictures of him?
Yeah, I mean, he's fine. He's okay. I have high standards, as you know.
You do, most certainly do, Anita.
Yeah.
Your very splendid-looking husband can take a bow at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. But, you know, the thing is that also being married to him, to the surgeon of the Viceroy of India, gives her some kind of protection to stay. So she does get married. He's also Australian. He's not English or Scottish. He's Australian in her eyes. So this marriage does take place. How loving it is, well, they don't spend much time in the same hemisphere in their married life. So
what's intriguing me, Anita, is there any correspondence from this woman? She just made this marriage that none of us can understand to a kind of random Australian doctor, which seems totally out of character. Do we have any illumination of her thoughts from letters or diaries or anything?
The saddest thing in the world is that the conservator of letters was Sophia, and she kept every letter that her family sent to her. They, to my terrible horror, didn't keep any of her letters, or they were destroyed or they are lost. And the sisters, their letters, whatever they owned, scattered to the wind. So again, these are things that may come out in people's attics. I know the letter about Sophia finding Catherine dead on the floor was found in an attic in Thetford, and a very nice man who I met there said, I've got this letter you might be interested in, just a little bit, you know. So these things may crop up.
If anyone is listening, has access to the diaries of Princess Bamba, we both want to read them.
Very, very much indeed. But it also, I mean, I sort of think it wouldn't be safe for her to keep a diary because she was being surveilled and knew it.
Tell us what happens next. 1926.
Let me take you back to 1924, first of all, because this is 61 years after Jinden's death. Bamba personally arranges for her grandmother's ashes to be transferred from Nasik, which is where the British allowed it to be, to Lahore, where her grandmother wanted to be. And she and Sophia's visiting at the time, go to Nasik, they collect them together, they go to a ghat on the Godwari River, where the ashes are scattered, and they say prayers with a Sikh priest in attendance. So you can just see, you know, that attachment to her family is so strong.
Has she converted back to Sikhism? Is she showing any interest in the Sikh religion?
I'm really glad you've raised that, actually. There are two things that happen these days with these girls, who people are really keen, and for good reason, to own. They are always described as Sikh princesses. They were, each one of them, Christian. They were born, baptised, and remained Christian and had Christian burials and funerals.
And there's no records of them
converting, or nothing
reading
at all.
the Guru Granth Sahib at home or something. No?
They were aware of it. They talked about being aware of it, but they wouldn't have described themselves as Sikhs. And you can see that from their funeral arrangements.
That's interesting. Isn't that interesting?
Also, they're always described as being Sikh princesses. They were mixed heritage, and everyone sort of deletes that from their mind.
The German bit, the Ethiopian bit, yeah.
Exactly right. Do you know, the other thing that I should say is that 1926, you see the difference within 2 years of who she thinks is her real family and people who are family, but she doesn't accept them. So do you remember I told you about her father having an affair with Ada Wetherall?
From the knocking shop. Yes, we do remember. Absolutely.
Well, you know, there are 2 children who are born to that relationship, and we're going to do a 4th episode on that because it's a miserable and dark story. What Bamba does to those girls is wicked. She's a great character. People are complicated. I won't tell that story now. I will tell it in our 4th episode. But let's sort of skip forward to 1939. Her husband dies in Scotland while she's in Lahore. She's 70.
Has she seen him for much time, or have they been separated?
Just living parallel lives. Yeah. You know, they're just living parallel lives, Willie, which is, you know, sort of answers your question, were they happily married? I think they were fine. I think they were okay, but it was a marriage to an end.
She was clearly a handful. Yeah.
Oh, shall I tell you a thing? So when I was researching Sophia, the book, I talked to a woman who had been a maid at Faraday House, and she said all the servants detested Bamba. They loved Sophia, detested Bamba, because in her words, this is a very elderly woman who was in her 80s who is talking to me, she was a class A, her words, bitch. That's what she said. She said, class A bitch. They would hide her clothes. They would sort of fold things up and put them in the wrong places just to hear her scream because she was so awful. But look, she is what she is. Her husband dies thousands of miles away in 1939 in Scotland. She's in Lahore.
Second World War's about to break out. Yeah.
She's trapped, okay? She can't leave. She's stuck there. And then in 1942, she learns that Catherine has died and has been found by Sophia. She can't go to the funeral. So she's grieving from a distance. And then in 1947, another great catastrophe, the partition of India. And Lahore, the jewel of the north, her family's ancestral city, which was mixed, Hindus, Sikhs and Muslims, it ends up on the Pakistan side. Now, you and I know how many people decided to leave for being the wrong religion, okay?
Yeah. 1.5 million people are killed in this terrific upheaval. Whole populations are on the move backwards and forwards. There is violence, there is rape, there is bloodshed. There are moments of extraordinary heroism and kindness when people shelter people who are fleeing mobs and so on at great personal cost. But it's not somewhere you want to be, and Bamba's caught in the middle of it.
Yeah, and a notably Sikh name, Duleep Singh, is her name, and people know who her grandfather was, but she stays put. And she stays put and is kind of looked after by a Muslim man who's like her factotum secretary, guide. So Birji stays with Bamba. That's a beautiful symmetry. And the only reason she's not killed in the riots, as far as we know, is that Birji, who is one of the most respected Muslims in the city, vouches for her. And also, I guess in a way, she's also protected. The not marriage with Sutherland is also a protection, because he can say, or she can say, that she is Mrs. Sutherland, a British doctor's widow, rather than Princess Bamba Duleep Singh, if she needs to. It's a useful identity to have in that period of time. Even though the world is falling apart, she refuses to acknowledge, really, that anything has changed. This is still her home. This is still where she belongs. Another tragedy of her story is that despite being the oldest sister, she's the last to die. She sees her younger sisters, her baby sisters, die before her. So Sophia dies in August 1948. We know that Catherine died even earlier. So this is really interesting. So some people say she refuses to fly back to England. It wasn't that. It wasn't that she refused to fly her sister's ashes out to India either. She travels by sea and over land because she said her sister was always frightened of flying. She says, I didn't want to take her on a plane because she didn't like to fly.
Although her sister's dead at this point.
Yeah, I know. But did you see the closeness of the sisters?
That said, the flight would have been something unusual at this period, and the boat would have been the normal way to go.
Yeah, but she actually comments on it, though, Willie. She says, my sister didn't like flying. That's why I'm not taking her by air.
Yeah.
And so Sophia had asked in her will for her ashes to be returned to India, and Bamba, an 80-year-old woman, it is left to her to take them, and she scatters them somewhere secret in Lahore. We don't know.
There is, obviously the Ghat where Ranjit Singh was cremated, which would have been the obvious place to have taken, you'd have thought.
It's a sensible guess, but we don't know for sure. She lives another 8 years, alone pretty much, only with Birji and her company.
The only Sikh left in Lahore after the ethnic cleansing of partition.
And it's a tragic picture because her sight is failing, her health is failing. She's constantly writing letters of complaint that she can't get a seat on the bus from Model Town into the city. She still calls herself to the very end the Queen of the Punjab, the last true sovereign of the Sikhs. But, to everybody around her in this new country, Pakistan, that is springing up around her, she's an anachronism. She's a weird thing.
I interviewed someone who's very like that, who was the last descendant of the Mughals. Mm-hmm. And this woman, whose ancestors had lived in the Red Fort, Princess Begum Sultan, lived in a tiny little house in the old city and worked in the ICCR library, stamping books as people took them out. And she wasn't going to leave her city because it was her city.
Yeah.
And this, I'm sure Bamba was thinking the same. She's going to be the last Sikh in Lahore. She's not going to go just because the incumbents happen to have changed. This is her city. This is the home of Ranjit Singh, of Duleep Singh. She's going to die there.
How lonely she was, because, you know, a lot of her friends would be dead or would have crossed the border. You know, that's just a fact. I mean, in her last years, she gets really very dark and she's sort of mulling over all of her anger. She's a woman who's lived all her life in rage. But you have to see how others have dealt with it. And I think Sophia then fighting for other people, that's really noble. They all went through the same thing. Catherine discovering peace with Lena, that's also lovely. And she has a life, you know, she has joy. There's a joy in their lives that does not exist for Bamba. And when she's sort of in her twilight, she starts putting out the story that the reason the entire Duleep Singh line dies with her, none of the children of Duleep Singh have any children. None of them do. With her generation, they're wiped out. That family disappears off the face of the planet. Sophia doesn't have children. Catherine doesn't have children. Victor doesn't have children. Freddie doesn't have children. Bamba doesn't have children. One of the things that Bamba starts putting around is that when they were in England, even when they were children at Elvedon being looked after by nannies, people were putting mystery powders in their food to make them sterile. Now, look, you can treat that the way that Sophia treated the story of she's being poisoned. You know, she thought she was being poisoned. Whatever it is, she died bitter, angry, and actually quite alone.
There was a thing, wasn't there, of putting bromide into the tea or something?
In World War I, to soldiers getting randy.
So it's not impossible.
Yep, but who knows?
But she's a crazy old woman. You interpret it as that, is it?
My feeling, spending so much time with them, is that this is an articulation of anger, rage, and trying to make sense of it all. And the fact that it ends with you, how awful is that? That it's all over. That however great you thought your family were, all over, all gone.
So 1957 is now, Pakistan is already beginning to go wrong, and she's now 87. Purji is her last link with the outside world. She's now in a Sikh-free city after the ethnic cleansing of partition. There are no Sikhs at her funeral.
No.
The funeral is arranged, oddly enough, by the Deputy High Commission of the British High Commission, which is a sort of terrible irony.
Oh, she would have hated
Presumably
it.
She still has a British
Can
passport.
you imagine what she would have thought of that? Yes, exactly right. So she's buried in Lahore's Christian Cemetery on Jail Road, buried under a Christian cross in a Pakistani cemetery, as Willie says, no Sikh to say the final prayers. We should say she died of a heart attack. There's a Persian couplet on her tombstone, and it was translated very helpfully by the Dawn newspaper, a Pakistani newspaper. And it goes like this: if you open this grave, you will just not know who is rich and who is poor, which is a line from Sadi, a great Persian poet.
Yes.
Yeah. The difference between royalty and civility vanishes when the bones are dug up. Isn't that lovely and sad and awful?
Very Sufi thought.
And her entire collection of Sikh era paintings, her watercolours, her miniatures, her manuscripts, her personal possessions, they all go to Pirji.
And there's now a museum where they presumably are on a show.
They're inside, the Lahore Fort. And you can see the Bamba Museum. I've seen it twice now and see all the...
Of course, the
bits.
Bamba Museum, that's
Bamba
her.
Museum, that's her.
I've been there.
Yes, there
absolutely. I hadn't made that connection. Right, of course, yes.
So, her house is demolished, long gone. The roses that she planted in Gulzar, they're all gone. Everything, almost every sign of her has gone. But so I'm really glad that we've done this about her, because she's really worth knowing, and that story encapsulates so much of the period. I think it's rather wonderful. So the sisters that we have been sort of circling, the ones I've been dropping their names every so often and saying, we'll come back to them, we're coming back to them now. It's Princess Pauline Duleep Singh and Princess Ada Irene Beryl Duleep Singh.
There is the story in one name. The whole thing. Yeah.
So just encapsulated in that, these are names not of the royal court. They're not of India. They're not even of the lineage of Duleep Singh.
No Jindans, no Victorias, no Alexandrinas, but Beryl.
They're working class names, and they are the daughters. The reason they are working class names is because they are the daughters of, yes, Maharaja Duleep Singh, but also his second wife, Ada Wetherell. Now, do you remember we were talking about Ada and what she did for a living and why this was actually just abhorrent to Queen Victoria that he'd settled instead of, with Bamba, who she really liked, with this woman. Just remind everyone what she did, because I think they might have forgotten.
So there was the question whether she was a chambermaid, a working class chambermaid, or whether she was actually a prostitute. And you, after reading the papers, more to the side of her being a prostitute.
Actually, I wouldn't say that. I would say this is what went on in the hotel that she worked in. I mean, she could very well have been.
You said she worked at a knocking shop was the phrase you used last time.
She worked at a knocking shop, but she could have been a chambermaid at the knocking shop. But whatever it is, that's where she caught the eye of Maharaja Duleep Singh. And so, you know, when he does that whole fleeing back to take his own kingdom back and jettisons his family, which is just the worst thing in the world, it sort of ends up, Bamba ends up drinking herself to death as a result. He takes off and settles with Ada. He drags Ada, and we'll get to this, but he drags Ada as his companion in revolution or treason, whatever way you want to put it.
So give us a sketch of Ada. How much do we know about her? Do we have any writings from her? Are there any letters surviving from her? We have a photograph, don't we?
We have photographs, yeah. So just take a look at the photograph that I sent you, which ironically, I think you also had Irene, Pauline and Sophia, who is the only sister who gives the second family the time of day, the only one who recognises that they are blood. So, I mean, Ada...
She's a very English-looking face. In the picture that I have in front of me, she's wearing a sort of boater.
Yeah, exactly.
She's well-dressed. She's not a beauty.
No.
And she looks quite tough. She looks as if you wouldn't fall out with Ada.
And this story will only make sense because you've already met the other three. Sophia, the one who fought, Catherine, the one who loved, Bamba, the one who went home. All these three sisters that we've talked about in previous episodes, they had, if not the love of the British establishment, they got money from the British establishment. They had an allowance which was set up from the East India Company.
The background to this in general is that the British would overlook brown skin if it had a tiara or a coronet attached to it. And throughout the period of the late 19th and early 20th century, the British would admit Maharajas to their clubs and to their houses in a way that they would not admit people without a title. These were the mores of the times. And Duleep Singh was brown, but he was a Maharaja, and therefore he was admitted to court, and he was Queen Victoria's favourite. The people we're going to admit to this story today, Ada and her children, did not have that safety net and did not have that sort of colour-breaking sort of magic quality.
They weren't the right kind of people. They simply weren't the right kind of people. But, in addition to that, there was nobody fighting their corner because Duleep Singh, at the time that he has these two little girls, is an enemy of the state. He is a traitor. You see cartoons of him in magazines like Punch, for example, which, lampoon him horrifyingly. He's dancing with a Russian bear like a fool, sort of dressed up a little bit like Malvolio, Shakespeare's ridiculous.
Which from a British perspective is not unfair, as he was dancing with the Russian bear and was trying to provoke insurrection and invasion. I
mean, the issue is this, the Russian bear is not dancing back. I mean, it's such a hopeless case, Duleep Singh's campaign is so awful. But you've got Pauline and Irene, who are not part of the settlement of the official family. And Queen Victoria despised the idea that, her once favourite was hanging around with somebody of such low class.
So what do we have from, we can imagine exactly what Queen Victoria thought about this. She'd be horrified because, again, it was fine to be an Indian Maharaja. It was absolutely not okay to go around in knocking shops marrying chambermaids.
Right.
From that perspective. But do we actually have any written remarks by her saying, cut them off or something like that?
No, nothing like that. Not directly from her, but from people who worked in and around her. There's a man called Ponsonby who's very much her senior courtier. And there are letters that go keeping an eye on Duleep Singh and expressing just how unamused anybody in court is about this latest chapter in Duleep's life. Now, remember, Duleep had been unfaithful throughout his marriage. These are, usually sort of low-key affairs, indiscretions. They remain in the shadows. There are some really interesting things. I went through some of the birth records around Elvedon. And there's a girl called Kate Singh who's born in a nearby Norfolk parish of Swaffham in 1876. That's the same year as Sophia.
That's very Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple of you, Anita.
No, it's how I roll as a journalist. That's what you want to know. It's like, where
so you found
these people are. Well, I mean,
not
I haven't got
necessarily.
DNA, darling. So, but it's at Kate Singh. How many of those were there to the pound in Norfolk in 1876?
In the parishes immediately around Elvedon.
Of Swaffham. And now Kate Singh grew up to be a parlourmaid. I mean, I looked at sort of the census records. What is unique and uniquely irritating about the Ada situation is that he marries her. And he marries her at a time where Queen Victoria is quite convinced he has gone mad. And she does write about that he's lost his senses.
We should say here that the mores of the times, however we look at it today, is that it's more or less fine to have affairs with chambermaids.
Or illegitimate children.
And Edwardian gentlemen, in inverted commas, would do that sort of thing. It was not okay to marry them. That was the class betrayal. And so what he's doing is he's acting like a foreigner in this case. No Englishman would marry the chambermaid from that class at that time. That's the code that is being broken.
Well, I mean, and it's one of many codes that Duleep is breaking. So after, sitting in Aden and sweating it out, he joins Ada in Paris. From Paris, they go to Moscow because Duleep has it in his mind he just has to turn up and the Tsar will call on him and the Tsar will say, brother, let's get the Brits. This is the great game. You are king. You are an important piece on the board. Tsar never calls him. He sits in Moscow for a full year in this rather dilapidated boarding house. It's called the Bolshoi. And a year later, Boxing Day, 1887, Ada gives birth to a daughter, Pauline, in that same sort of dilapidated boarding house.
Just to clarify the chronology here, is it your working theory, that he's met Ada long before he goes off to Aden, and that she then joins him? And that
she joins him, yes, 100%. It's a segue that is clear.
Where do they meet?
Paris, first of all, as I said. Once he leaves Aden, he's vowed he's never going to go back to England again. So he goes to Paris instead as a jumping off point to get to Moscow. Boxing Day, this is a gift that nobody really wants, Willie, because, he's waiting for Tsar Alexander to do his thing. Tsar Alexander III is not giving him the time of day. And Ada gives birth to a daughter, Pauline, in this same dilapidated boarding house, the Hotel Bolshoi. And Duleep, this whole reason Duleep is there is because he is single-mindedly trying to woo the Tsar. Although he doesn't actually, when he first arrived, thinks he needs to woo the Tsar at all. He's just going to be called upon. It is becoming completely clear to him that the Tsar does not value him at all. He's not this great piece in the great game at all.
Do you have a sense of who he's calling on? Is he just sort of turning up himself at the Foreign Office and dropping his card? Or what's the process by which he's approaching the Russian authorities?
He has sent letters, he sent carte de visite, he has made it known that he is here and he is waiting. There is a very, very good book by a man called Christy Campbell. If you want to get into the depths of that particular story, he does it brilliantly well, The Maharaja's Box, where he also does talk about the kind of spies who are following Duleep, who sort of pick his pocket, who make sure he's completely destitute while he's in Moscow and his dwindling funds are just disappearing. There's an Irish connection. There's also, it's far too complicated to go through here. But I tell you, on top of that, there is a suggestion, and I got the sense, although Christy doesn't say it explicitly, that Ada might have been a spy too for the British.
For the British?
To just kind of keep chopping away the ground underneath Duleep's feet for the British.
What gives you that impression? Because it's an important detail.
Oh, and you'll see later on in this here episode, Willie, because there are things that will go on towards the end of his life that will tell you why I think this. But anyway, Pauline, it's left to Ada to name her. I mean, Duleep does a little bit of a meddle and says, okay, I know. I worked with Sophia when I sort of gave a middle name that pleased Queen Victoria. Let's do it with Pauline as well. Alexandrina is the name given to her. Now, it could be to flatter the Tsar, or it could be just to hedge your bets with Queen Victoria, just keep everybody cool with her. But, the way he was naming his children at this time felt, homage if you feel generous, but leverage if you feel, actually, this is a man who knows he's going to be hitting hard times and might need to call upon people.
So he eventually gives up in Moscow. There's no word from the Russians, no word from the Foreign Office, no word from the Tsar. And he heads back to Paris, which has now become effectively his base. And there, 2 years later, he gives birth to another girl, Irene. And by this stage, they're actually married. Is that right? That they've had a small civil ceremony in April 1889.
Yeah, because while Bamba is alive, which she is when Pauline is born, they can't get married. And also, I don't think he probably was that bothered about getting married. But once Bamba is safely dead, he can marry again. And so, Irene is technically legitimate where Pauline is not. And again, Irene, Helen, Beryl, those are the names. There's nothing Sikh, there's nothing Punjabi, there's nothing even to flatter royalty. So you get through the children's names, I would suggest, a bit of the psychology of the Maharaja as well.
And the world that he's living in, yeah.
The world that he's living in, but also the world that he thinks he can reach. There's no point in giving this child, this little baby, a flattering name. What's the point? It's not going to work. It hasn't been working. And what is very important is that, these children are rejected by everybody, by the rest of the family, by Queen Victoria's court, by everybody. No, people just think he's nuts. He's got nothing. He'll amount to nothing.
And do we have, Anita, any sense at this point of his relationship with Ada? They've been together for a while. He made his bed and now he's sleeping in it. It isn't like he's just dropping this chambermaid now that things are not working out. He sticks with her.
Well, he sticks with her, but I would suggest maybe not out of love, but, there's nothing else for him. Queen Victoria will not receive Ada. She won't receive Duleep either unless he apologises, which he's not keen to do. She will not give any time to Pauline or Irene. These girls are never going to be blessed with, that kind of court dress coming out. None of that.
Do you have a sense of her at all at this time? Do we have any way of indicating what she's up to or thinking or...
We'll get a sense of her very soon because it will become apparent that this is a woman who likes the finer things in life, particularly she likes to gamble. Let's just do a little more of a contrast, if you don't mind, between these lives. Because you've got Sophia, christened at Windsor, Queen Godmother, the pram that's wheeled around Buckingham Palace, dandling by, Victoria herself. And Pauline and Irene are eventually baptised in a colonial hotel chapel in Algiers in the winter of 1892.
How are they suddenly in Algiers?
I don't know. There are bits of this story which, by virtue of the fact that this man was living quite a shadowy life, we don't know. We just know from the records that's where it happens.
Now, this is, of course, the beginnings, and we're going to be dealing with this in a very exciting series that I am deep in the reading for at the moment on the French in Algeria. Do you think there's any sense that he could be thinking of settling there? Because this is when large numbers of French are being given land in Algiers, and they're given great tracts of land which are being expropriated from the locals. Could we imagine Duleep Singh ending up as a pied noir in Algeria?
No, because this is not a man who knows how to start again. This is a man who is only known in existence where Queen Victoria has been responsible for his downfall, then for his salvation, then for his downfall again. I mean, you ask about the relationship between Ada and Maharaja Duleep Singh. Well, we don't know. That's such a sketchy existence that they're living at this time. But what we do know for sure that at the beginning, she's living with the Maharaja in his hotel suite. But then she moves out. She takes her children, she takes her belongings, and she moves to the western outskirts of Paris, where she sets up home with this new and mysterious female friend, a woman called Madame Baraton, who London spies conclude, because we've seen the documentation, she must be a Russian agent sent by a Tsar. And they only know that because they're following him. So they know about Baraton.
And is this from British intelligence records?
British intelligence records. So, so London spies thought that, Baraton was this kind of Russian agent who's just keeping an eye, even though the Tsar doesn't want anything to do with her, but they're keeping an eye on Baraton, keeping an eye on him. So you can see this is a really sort of weird existence, which is also sad because this marriage seems to have fallen apart. Ada, her two daughters, Madame Baraton, they're living now in an expensive villa at a place called Le Vicinette, but Duleep is paying for it. And Duleep himself is paying for himself to stay in this Paris hotel suite, which is sort of a downgraded suite to what he's used to, and he's dying. So what will happen in the Hotel de la Tremie, it's just 2 minutes walk from the Champs-Elysees. It looks glamorous from the outside. Inside, though, it was faded. It was described as having this sort of musty smell of neglect at the time. He was only 55 years of age. He looked so much older than that. And he has a devastating heart attack. Friends had stopped visiting him. His family weren't seeing him. Pauline, the last time, he saw Irene saw her father, she was 3 years old. The last time Pauline saw her father, she was 5 years old. Ada is living it up, the second family, somewhere else with this mysterious woman, spending his money. He dies completely alone on the floor, crumpled up.
But the hotel is still there, and it's now slightly posher. It's now a tarty 5-star.
It is, indeed. It's a much nicer place than it was at the time. So Duleep dies in, just to give a date to this, 1893, October 1893. And eventually, the British government settles some money on Pauline and Irene. It puts them, at least in paperwork terms, on a largely equal footing with Sophia, Catherine, and Bamba. But they are always referred to, and I think this is really interesting, as the two of the second family. They're never referred to by name. In the India Office papers that I've seen, Sir Owen Tudor Byrne, the Viceroy's private secretary, writes about them really coldly, and this is how every piece of documentation about these girls. The 5 girls, Bamba, Catherine, Soph, and 2 of the second family will receive about £22,000 each. So you get names for the senior 3, the other 2 are the other 2. So you've got Pauline then sort of growing up, and she's super sociable. She's got some money behind her. She's the more sturdy of the sisters. Where's
the money from? Is it the India Office or Duleep has left or something, or what?
It's the India Office has said there is a part of their agreement when they take the whole of the Sikh kingdom is that they will settle on Duleep to give him a livable amount of money, which he then challenges and says it's not livable, and to his progeny they will get some kind of pension, some kind of settlement. And that is what this is. It's coming basically from, a fraction of what was the Sikh kingdom. And the amount is always something that irks Duleep, because he says, I was a child, you made me sign this. I didn't realise how little you're letting my children sink in this world. What are you giving us? This is nothing. This is not what you said you were doing. And so that, leads to the resentment before he dies. The one interesting thing does happen is that after Duleep Singh dies, there are 2 members of the family who extend a hand to Pauline and Irene. And they are, I would arguably say, the most altruistic and the people I probably most like to spend time with. And that is Sophia and Frederick, the one, your favourite.
The antiquarian.
The antiquarian who's living in Norfolk, who's collecting Jacobite art, who's just living a quiet little life. They welcome him. So Freddie's got a home at a place called Blow Norton in Norfolk, and the door is open to these 2 other girls. And they are also welcome at Faraday House. Not only does she welcome the girls, but that photo of Sophia, Ada, Pauline and Irene is taken at one of Sophia's places, so you've got this sort of warmth that opens up to these girls. And in January 1911, Pauline, who is the more gregarious of the children, and she's quite a beauty, she is now, because of Sophia and Freddie and the position that their sort of affection has given them, is being recognised at least in society papers, because they're scandalous. They may not be sort of venerated in the way that Sophia ever was in the press as they're daughters of a Maharaja, but they are glamorous.
So, Anita, she's on the cover of Country Life in the Girls in Pearls section, where you always have a beautiful girl, even to this day, sitting there about to get married or something. Is she called Princess on that cover?
Yeah, they call her Princess Pauline. And it's one of those sort of sniggering titles where that it is, for those who know where she and Irene come from, there is never a time where they don't feel that they're being sniggered at the same time as they're being addressed by their correct title.
Nonetheless, that's the cover of Country Life is a kind of marker at the time for society, and there she is on it.
For upper middle class England, this is really impressive. In 1911, the upper middle classes would have looked, and she looks beautiful. She's a beautiful, you could do the description of her on Country Life. She's attractive. She's a very attractive woman.
So she is depicted on what looks like a chaise longue, and she's wearing a sort of ball gown. and she doesn't look at all Indian, unlike her sisters. She could pass very easily in a Norfolk village if she was wandering around with Freddie for someone from Norfolk.
And she's beautiful. She's got that sort of classic Edwardian look, a very, fashionable haircut. She looks lovely. So Pauline, who is the more acceptable of the sisters, is keen to get to know the others too. And Sophia wants to be the bridge, the ambassador to that. So when Sophia is out seeing Bamba in Lahore, she says, Pauline, come out and meet us. Come and learn about your father. Come and learn about your history. And Pauline goes out in 1907. Bamba is completely against it. She does not want her to come.
We are not surprised that Bamba gives her the cold shoulder. Bamba's that kind of woman. Yeah.
Well, it's also, in her mind, her beloved father, and she does love her father, rejected them for this other woman. And these are the children of the other woman. So, Sophia blasts through this and says, look, you've just got to give her a chance. Pauline does not make this easy at all. Because when she turns up with these 3, and these are from Sophia in her diary, 3 huge boxes and several small, she says. I bought enough for 10 years. She's bought enough for 20, which is, this is sort of, again, she's playful, but critical as well. Within 6 weeks, despite bringing enough stuff for 20 years, Pauline's back on the boat to France because Bamba and her are rowing constantly. And that is largely because Bamba's being really cruel while she's there. She does not hesitate to tell Pauline what kind of a woman her mother was.
Do we know that? Does Sophia say that?
We know
that.
Sophia says that in her diaries. So not only, what kind of woman her mother was, but that, she got all of her undesirable qualities from her mother. Pauline, in turn, let me tell you, according to Sophia's diary, doesn't make life easy at all. She just won't get out of bed on time. She'll flirt with the wrong people. She'll be rude to people who matter. She is a sort of, silly 19-year-old who is not making an effort. But also, why would she? She's in a hostile environment. Bamba's being just awful to her. So, look, when she sort of realizes that, things aren't comfortable, she looks for another family. She had a chance. Sophia opens the door. Freddie opens the door to this old family. But, when she realizes it just doesn't fit her, her skin doesn't feel right with these people. She marries. In 1914, just before the war, she meets and falls in love with a young army officer called John Shirley Archibald Torrey, 2nd Lieutenant Rifle Brigade.
Do we know much about his background?
We know that he was killed at the Battle of Loos in just a year after their marriage, just 1 year in 1915.
But we don't know what class he's from. I mean, has she made the class jump? Now she's on Country Life and so on. He's
upper middle class. Yeah. He's not. That's what he is. He's exactly the kind of person whose family would have read that magazine. But we do know how he died, because you can look into the war records, and he died. Loos was one of the most horrific engagements in the war for the British, and it's because of the use of poison gas. They released chlorine from cylinders, the Germans did. The wind blew it back into the British trenches.
It's a catastrophe.
They lost something like 60,000 men in 4 days, William. And, this is one man who was caught up in it, Pauline's husband. So, she's married at 25. She's a widow at 27. What is interesting at this time is what the war does to all of these sisters. Some of them are begging their family to side with the Germans, i.e. Catherine, who's with Lena in Germany. Some of them will drop their rocks and decide to be nurses for the war effort, like the majority of suffragettes, Sophia. Bamba, willing the British to lose from India. And then you have Ada and her daughters. Ada does something, altruistic, which from the little we know of her is not really, doesn't come naturally to her. She volunteers for the French Red Cross at Limoges, and she's part of the ambulance corps. We know this.
This is not an automatic move for someone who's been hanging out in Monte Carlo casinos.
No, but she does it. And, she tends to soldiers at Verdun, which is, as everyone who knows this period in history, one of the longest and bloodiest battles of the war. And then she returns afterwards.
That shows some character.
It 100% does, so it's from being this chambermaid to a suspected spy living with a Russian agent than to becoming, somebody
I love this house.
treating
2 rival agents living together in a dim Paris suburb. Exactly.
It's wonderful. And if only we knew more, if only there were more records on who said what to whom and when. Ada does then return to London in 1919 because, after experiencing what she's experienced, Willie, she never ever wants to see France again. And she has run up debts, her lifestyle and her time with Madame Baraton and her time at the casino tables of Monte Carlo, debts of over, we know, £17,000. Nowhere to call home, desperate, destitute. And it is, again, one of the nice people from the first family who steps in to save her. Where Sophia tried to ease the way for Pauline, at least, to join the rest of the family, Freddie steps in with some material help.
Freddie sounds lovely. Always trust an antiquarian, I say.
Okay.
A nice Norfolk antiquarian, just the man you need in a tight spot.
So Freddie's a darling, actually. He sort of gives her money. Sometimes he gives her money anonymously. We sort of subsequently find out from records that he was sending money her way. And eventually, it's actually Ada's not the kind of person who's going to live on the perhaps promise of somebody's kindness, which may dry up. So she goes to the India office herself, Ada does, and she says, I'm going to make you a deal. You give me a small house and you give me a hat shop and I will never bother you again. She's plucky, man. This is a survivor.
Does that correspondence survive?
It survives. And because the India office is thinking about it, and you've got them saying, the whole conversation, if she came in, she said that's all she wants. She wants to be a milliner so she can support herself, and she wants a small house. And then you've got this toing and froing,
and they do that?
The India office,
They give it to her?
They give it to her. And that's what she does. That's
like
what
the hat shop. So she starts up in a knocking shop. She goes to the
as
casinos.
Who knows what. May well have been a chambermaid. I don't know.
Then she's at Verdun as a nurse, and now she's a milliner.
And also not so close to her daughters. It's you get the sense, if not, the concrete proof, but just the tidal movements of these daughters that they're not close to their mother. Yeah. They're just kind of, they're lost. And Pauline is in grief. You asked me what we know about Torres. We don't know much except that she loves him because she never remarries.
Right.
She visits with Sophia, but she really doesn't have a home of her own. And by the 1920s, she's sort of drifted back to Paris, trying to be a free Parisian, but quietly running out of money.
And French is kind of her first language now.
It is, yeah.
But what has happened, Anita, to Irene?
Irene, the more fragile of the two children, largely sort of left in neglect by everybody who should have cared with her. Well, not surprising. And if you know anything about psychology, people will look for their own families. If their families have let them down, they try and create their own. So in 1910, so even before Pauline gets married, even though she's a younger child, she marries a Frenchman called Pierre-Marie Alexandre Villemont. And he's a wealthier man than Torres is, because the wedding, we know, takes place at the Church of Saint-Philippe de Roule in Paris on the 15th of March, 1910. She is a society wedding. It is a society wedding. She's a society bride because, we see her portrait is taken by Ellis and Walery.
It's a gorgeous image, yeah.
Yeah, they are society photographers. They don't bother with just anybody's
so
marriage.
Again, she's got some money.
Well, her husband-to-be has some money.
She's dressed up in a proper bridal outfit here with a long train. She's got a sort of fluffy, not a tiara, what do you call it? Those sort of ostrich feather.
It's a fascinator.
Hats. Yeah.
It's a fascinator.
It's a fascinator. And she's looking pretty fascinating in her fascinator, standing on some steps, all set to get married.
This should be her happily ever after, Willie, and it clearly isn't, because we know, that actually it's a bit of a disaster from the start. There are records of her having epileptic fits as early as 1915. We know that she starts unraveling psychologically, and we can't immediately draw the line, but it is suggested that her husband does not treat her very well. So in the 1920s, she spends time in a nursing home being treated for something called neurasthenia, one of those Edwardian catch-all diagnosis for somebody who is just burnt out, depressed and anxious. There wasn't another name for all of that. So severe depression and anxiety.
So my grandfather had that, and he was subjected to electric shocks at this period.
So was Irene.
Yeah.
So was Irene. So that was the cure back then, electroshock therapy. And Freud was saying it was, at the time, this is what the thinking was, that it was the result of unfulfilled sexual stimulation or non-completed coitus that caused this.
Very Freud.
We have learned a lot since then. So after this rather brutal treatment, and I don't know how your grandfather was after the electroshock therapy.
And it scarred him for life, actually.
Well, Irene moves back to an apartment that she has in Paris on the Avenue Hoche. It's an elegant, expensive street. Must be something that was settled through, her separation with her husband. Although she does have some funds of her own, we know this. And she seems okay. She takes up painting. She has friends. We know that she dines out. But secretly, you know what? This return to France is not good for her because she's estranged from the people who knew her best. And Paris reminds her of her most miserable times with them. Remember, she was born in Paris. It wasn't a good time. Her father dies in Paris. Maharaja Duleep Singh dies in Paris, who didn't really give much of a damn about her. And Ada, who also didn't give very much of a damn about her, sort of left her to go and gamble in Monte Carlo. So, this is not a good place. And it is in Paris that she starts losing touch with reality. So no amount of the painting or the reading or, there's a music score book from her childhood that she was trying to learn in Paris. She's trying so hard to push back against what today we will call quite clearly depression and anxiety. And she is fighting and doing her best, but there just weren't the tools or the understanding at that time to help her. There was electroshock therapy. So what you see at this point is that a creative, very beautiful young woman is breaking into pieces. In August 1925, any kind of idea that she is happily married with Villemont, that just goes out the window because Villemont decides to separate with her. And within days, Irene climbs to the top floor of their apartment building in Paris and throws herself from a window. The fall breaks her body, but she doesn't kill herself. And what it does, oh God, it makes her life, already a really difficult life, even worse, because you've got the French press descending, La princesse indienne suicidaire is what they, sort of headline it.
1925, she's throwing herself out of a window, but hasn't died. 1926, Freddie, her half-brother, does die, the antiquarian in Norfolk. Is that old age? Because he can't be that old by 1926.
He's quite fat and not very healthy, and clearly there's a heart problem that runs in the family because his father dies at 55, remember? So he dies, he just keels over and dies. I mean, what Freddie's death means is that, that one person who's trying to, particularly since we're talking about Irene and Pauline, who was trying to be that father figure, who tries to get them, to come to Blow Norton, his home in Norfolk, who puts adjoining coach houses in for, so that his sisters can come and go as they please and feel like they have a safe place. When he dies, all the gloves come off, and Bamba, who is the one who, has been perhaps biting her tongue a little bit, she basically comes out saying she hates them. Now she doesn't even have to play nice now that Freddie has gone. Irene is alone now in Monte Carlo, trying to cheer herself up. Like her mother before her, she's been gambling. She has been spending what little she has, and she's been losing. And the funeral, Freddie's funeral, is the last time you'll see the other four sisters in the same place. They'll get together at St. Andrew's Church in Blow Norton, but Irene will not be there. She can't come because she's on the Riviera and she's convinced that she is losing her mind. So she's in no fit state, even though she has affection for Freddie. Who could not have affection for Freddie? Freddie's the only really very lovely person who shows sort of unconditional love to these young women. She won't come, even for the funeral, even though Pauline will put aside all her differences with Bamba and stand at a graveside with the woman she most detests in the world. Likewise for Bamba, Irene can't.
And this is now turning into, this wonderful succession of stories that you've presented us with in this series. We now sort of end up in this side of paradise. We're in a kind of F. Scott Fitzgerald novel because we're in the south of France. and Irene is down there with mental health issues.
Yeah, and you know what, I should probably say that, it's a trigger warning, this is what it is, but if you find any discussion of people taking their own lives difficult, this is what we're going to talk about next, so just be aware of that. On the 8th of October, 1926, less than 2 months after Freddie's funeral, Sophia receives a telegram. A fisherman has dragged out a woman's body out of the waters of the Riviera. She was wearing expensive clothes. She was believed to be in her mid-30s. And they know it's Irene because Irene has left a note on a nearby rock explaining who she is and what she's about to do. In fact, she writes 2 notes, Willie. One note on the rock identifies herself. One letter is for her lawyer and a very sort of loyal friend, if you like, a man called Lancelot Smith. And she writes it on the morning of her death. And I'm going to read the letter because I think actually we owe it to Irene because she so easily just disappears through the cracks of these stories. And because I think she deserves to speak in her own voice. Nobody will ever hear of me again as I am going to commit suicide this afternoon. I am homeless. My nerves have prevented me continuing my studies, but I have grasped my object. I've been staying a week at Monte Carlo, but here I only play the fool and lose my pocket money. Please forgive me for troubling you in such troublesome times, but it is the last time.
I am homeless. Now, that is something that doesn't speak well, really, of the rest of the family, because they're not looking after their sister. Her sisters have Faraday House, and Bamba has Gulzar in Lahore. Catherine has Coalhatch House in Penn. And Irene, at 36 years old, the last daughter of the last Maharaja of the Punjab, has nowhere. She's literally homeless. And that's what she writes in her letter.
Yeah, but, doors were opened to her. Sophia absolutely would have taken her in, but she doesn't want anything to do with this family that she, in some way, thinks of as part of her disease, part of her sadness. This name, this lineage, this family story has brought her nothing but sadness and perhaps made it impossible, well, although we don't know how her husband treated her, but impossible to form and keep an attachment because he does certainly leave her.
Yes, they're not good at marriages in this family.
Well, that letter, when I read it, was, heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking to read it now. So, as I say, if that triggers anything for anybody, I do apologise. Do reach out. There are people who can help. Let's talk about what happens after Irene dies, because Irene did have some money, quite a bit of money.
She left. You found a will, didn't you, Anita? Which you show has rather more in it than one might have expected for someone who says she's homeless. She left £30,000, which is a fair amount of money in the 1930s, and so while she's homeless, she's not destitute.
No, she's not. I think it's completely fair. And also, there's a material settlement from Villemont as well, so...
Who was an aristocrat and had money.
Yeah, and who may not have been able to live with her anymore or wanted to live with her. And we don't know how cruel he may have been with her. But, they weren't together. But he still puts aside money to look after her. But she was homeless in spirit. I say that. Yeah. And, that letter to Lancelot Smith, she changes her will in it. This is it tells you everything you need to know about her, because her old will had left everything to Sister Pauline. The new will leaves everything to Dr. Bernardo's, which is a children's charity. So the message can't be clearer. She, at the end, wanted to leave everything that she owned, around this 30,000 that you're talking about, to Dr. Bernardo's home for poor and unwanted children. What do you see in that? I mean, the message to the family is clear. I've been unloved. I was unwanted too. And that's all she can think of. They don't deserve anything. It is only, she wants the money to help others who are in her same situation.
And because of this changed will at the very end, we have this terrible postscript where Bamba shows herself at her very worst.
Yeah, Bamba really does behave appallingly. So Pauline contests the will. You're not going to be surprised by that. These two are full blood sisters. Saying that she was not of sound mind in her final hours. Dr. Bernard. It goes into the courts, and Dr. Barnardo's fights back. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, Bamba decides to intervene. She hires one of the most feared King's counsels in the country. He's a baronet. He's a Conservative MP. His name is Sir Ellis Hume Williams. He is an absolute Rottweiler in court. And for days, William, he tears Irene's reputation apart. And you can see in the way that papers cover this, it is awful. Things like black blood ran in her veins and she would scratch to get it out.
This is what he says. This is Ellis Hume Williams.
Yeah. And, that this is the scratching of her, that she would self-harm. That's how we get to know that she was self-harming. Things that, the family would really possibly rather not have made public. But, Bamba, when she's fighting for something, she's all in fighting for something. He talked about her skin conditions, the fact that she was causing that herself as well, pulling her hair out, all of this kind of stuff that really was humiliating and embarrassing to the postscript of somebody who, when, she was covered in the newspapers, it was that beautiful photograph of her.
It's a complete train crash, this.
Oh, it's just hideous. And Pauline and Bamba, after this case, which, by the way, Bamba loses, and not only does she not get a penny of Irene's money, but she has to pay all the court costs.
This Rottweiler.
Yeah. Oh, it's just awful. So, they never speak to each other again. Pauline disappears after this terrible experience with her family. And the only other time that Pauline will see Sophia is at Ada's funeral in 1930. Neither Bamba nor Catherine will come. Sophia's the only one who shows up. And they mourn together, a woman that Sophia would have had every reason to despise, but the only mother that Pauline has ever known. There is a postscript to this, and I didn't put all of what we've talked about is in the book that I wrote, Sophia. But there is new stuff which I didn't know about, and which Peter Bunce, who I've mentioned, the historian, who has sort of spent years tracking the Duleep Singh story.
He's been following this trail ever since, hasn't he?
Even before he was collecting all the ephemera of Duleep Singh, and it's largely his stuff that you can see at the Kensington Palace exhibition.
You should read and buy Anita's book, and then you should go and see Peter Bunce's exhibition, because they're both extraordinary.
Well, that's very kind of you. And for me, the trail kind of stopped after the funeral. Or maybe I just stopped looking, perhaps. But in the 1950s, when there's a Patiala University historian called Ganda Singh, he actually interviewed Bamba in Lahore for his book, Maharaja Duleep Singh and His Correspondence. And he asked Bamba, whatever became of, because nobody knew what happened to your half-sister Pauline. And she says, I don't know. And just kind of barked at him, didn't know, didn't care. And there were really lots of lurid theories, that she might have been killed in a bombing raid during the Second World War, that she might have ended up in a German concentration camp, that she might have been a collaborator, that she was part of the resistance, that she simply disappeared in wartime France. But thanks to Peter, actually, none of it's true, because we know now that he got an email from a distant relative of Lieutenant Torrey.
The guy killed in the Battle of Loos. Yeah. Exactly
that, and this relative had been researching his own family tree and had come across this French record, a burial of a woman, date 1941, in the southwest of France. So this is a place in the foothill of the Pyrenees, at a place called Sanatorium de Trespuy, and it's high above the town. And Peter did spend months pursuing this, and he recovered Pauline's French death certificate.
Well done, Peter. Brilliant work.
And recovered her last will and testament. Yeah, no, really, excellent work. And all it said, the document that he recovered just said death report of a foreign subject in France. And so we could piece together what happened. She developed TB towards the end of her life in the late 1930s. And in those days, it could be a death sentence, no antibiotics, nowhere for them.
Not a nice death at all.
No, I mean, you would put in quarantine units in these sanatoriums, and, sometimes then the only other way to go is the graveyard. She did not tell her sisters that she was dying. You know, she couldn't tell Sophia, she couldn't tell anybody. And so she died at this sanatorium on the 10th of April, 1941, at the age of 53, and was buried by the authorities in a cemetery where no family was present, no mourners were present, no word was sent.
Like her dad.
Sad, 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 sad.
It's been a decade now, nearly, since you wrote your book. And when you look back at this tragic succession of train crashes, for most of them, it's a very, very sad story. What do you take away from this story?
That it is exactly that. It's a sort of a tragedy that does have a hard full stop. Because what to me has always been remarkable, that none of the children of the first or second family ever have children of their own. You know, apart from Freddie, who finds some modicum of happiness.
Is Freddie married? No.
No.
Single?
No. He has a very close relationship with a local priest. Yeah, I mean, he's sort of a, happy being a collector, and he goes on sort of trips with this this local vicar, and they seem to be sort of having just a nice life, sort of bumbling about. So, but he's an avowed bachelor. He never gets married. Victor, we mentioned in one of the previous episodes, dies fairly young, is buried in Monte Carlo, never has children. Sophia sort of has some kind of purpose to her life, even at the end. Catherine has love, loses love, but then also has a mission when she's, as it has been put, the Indian Schindler. And then you've got these two, Pauline and Irene, who sort of just evaporate, which is very sad. And there's no one else left. So I think what I'm struck by is, number one, truth is stranger than fiction. Because I know for a fact, if I'd have taken this as some kind of proposal for a Bridgerton series, people would have said, can you go back and make this more believable? Because this many things can't happen to one family.
Yep.
It's crazy. Are you nuts? And number two, isn't it good to put people back into their story? Because for many, the story has always been really simple. Duleep Singh was the one with the tragic life, and his children, the Sikh children, the cubs of Ranjit Singh, the Lion of Punjab, were Sikhs, and then not much else. So to actually follow them through and follow that story and follow, to deal with the complexity, even of Duleep himself, because he's not a hero in this story. When he's older, he's not a hero in this story.
And although these are now mascots for the Sikh community in Britain, and people, there are blue plaques, and there was a massive party for the exhibition opening and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
None of these girls, I get the impression, nor Freddie particularly embraced their Sikh. They're Christians.
They were Christians.
Yeah.
I mean, they were Christians. Their father converted to Christianity. Their mother was a devout Christian.
At the end.
He did,
yeah.
But by that time he's estranged from his children. He's doing it because it's, well, look, there's one school of thought that says he converts back because he really truly believes, and he was duped while in the care of a Scottish foster father and mother to give up his Sikh identity. But there is another that suggests actually, converting back will again make him beloved by his old, sort of countrymen, who will then help him with this revolution to get the British out and pay Victoria back for doing all the things that he says she had done to him. So, but all the children were Christians. They were all Christians when they died.
And when you go to Elvedon, it is in a Christian graveyard that
it is at a Christian graveyard. And how ironic is it that he, the Maharaja, is buried next to Maharani Bamba, the woman whose life he kind of ruined and whose heart he broke, and little Eddie, who's the most innocent of them all. Anyway, that's all we've got time for. Hope you enjoyed this mini-series.
You've really cheered us up today, Anita. Thank you for that.
I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. Till the next time we meet, it's goodbye from me, Anita. Anand.
Goodbye from me, William Dalrymple.